Chapter 241, Reappearance of the Ghost Masked Man. Of course, besides the Shao clan, Duan Lingtian also entered the imperial palace and asked the emperor to help him gather these materials. Besides that, he also went to the Divine Might Marquis estate in the Duan clan. The Duan clan currently regarded Duan Lingtian as their hope. When the Duan clan higher-ups heard that Duan Lingtian would be leaving the Crimson Sky Kingdom and head to the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom to enter one of the 5 great sects of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, they agreed to Duan Lingtian's requests without condition. "Kid, our Duan clan will pay for the materials you asked others to gather as well." The Duan clan's Grand Elder, Duan Zhen, said readily. "Then I'll thank Grand Elder first." Duan Lingtian laughed and didn't refuse, since he and the Duan clan were each taking what they needed. What the Duan clan wanted was the Void Advancement Pill. Even if he were unable to obtain one from one of the sects in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, once his own cultivation steps into the 7th level of the Nascent Soul stage and he becomes a Grade 5 alchemist, he will be able to refine one himself. After leaving the Duan clan, Duan Lingtian went to the Su clan. The Su clan's patriarch, Su Boya, personally greeted Duan Lingtian in. "Commander Duan." Duan Lingtian went straight to the point. "Patriarch Su, I came here today because I want to ask you to help me gather some materials. In a month, I'll come to get them, and at that time, Patriarch Su can quote a price." "This is naturally not a problem." Su Boya nodded and received the piece of paper with a pile of materials written on it from Duan Lingtian. His gaze was extremely complicated. In the past, he was discussing with all of the Su clan's elders about how to deal with Duan Lingtian. But in the blink of an eye, Duan Lingtian instead abruptly turned his situation around, and now even their Su clan didn't dare offend him. Moreover, he suspected that Duan Lingtian was surely involved in the disappearance of their Su clan's Grand Elder, Su Nan. But not to mention the fact that he didn't have any proof, even if he did have proof, he still wouldn't dare look for trouble with Duan Lingtian. To a certain degree, Duan Lingtian was already bound to the imperial family and the Divine Might Marquis estate, so he was far from something the Su clan could match. "Thank you, Patriarch Su. Farewell." Duan Lingtian bid his farewell and left, directly walking out of the audience hall. Right at this moment, vigilance arose in Duan Lingtian's heart, and his body moved. He noticed a figure flash over, and on the silver, Grade 8 spirit weapon in the figure's hand, a sheen that was jet black like ink flickered, obviously having been tainted with toxic poison. "Duan Lingtian, I want you dead." The person once again rushed at Duan Lingtian. However, the person's 9th level body tempering cultivation was nothing in Duan Lingtian's eyes, so he was directly kicked away by Duan Lingtian. "Su Tong, I never thought that even after you lost your cultivation, you'd still be so vicious." Duan Lingtian's face sank, as the person that had sneak attacked him was precisely Su Tong. This was also the reason why his spiritual force didn't have any reaction. A martial artist at the 9th level of the body tempering stage couldn't pose any threat to him. Su Tong was injured by Duan Lingtian's kick and crashed onto the ground. It was difficult for him to stand up once more, and his vicious gaze stared fixedly at Duan Lingtian. "Duan Lingtian, you crippled my Dantian and killed my grandfather. I resolve to destroy you or die trying." "Resolve to destroy me or die trying? You?" Duan Lingtian's gaze went cold. This Su Tong really hadn't learned his lesson. Su Tong. Meanwhile, Su Boya, who had noticed the movement, had come out as well, and his face sank when he saw the scene before him. "What are you doing?" "Patriarch, I want to take revenge for my grandfather and for myself." Su Tong said coldly. "Enough. From today onwards, the resentment between you and Duan Lingtian is abolished. If the incident from today happens once more, I'll expel you from the Su clan." Su Boya slightly frowned. This Su Tong was truly mad. Not to mention the fact that Su Tong was only a cripple, even the entire Su clan couldn't afford to offend the current Duan Lingtian. Su Tong's body trembled when he heard what Su Boya said, and he lowered his head, but the accumulated hatred in his eyes were almost capable of causing his eyes to explode. "Patriarch Su, farewell." Duan Lingtian nodded to Su Boya and left the Su clan to return home. Meanwhile, the sky had turned dark. However, when he had just arrived before the gate to his house, Duan Lingtian noticed a figure that seemed to transform into a specter and silently descended before him. Whoosh! And at almost the exact same time, Shangquan appeared behind Duan Lingtian. Shangquan was concealed by Duan Lingtian's side all this while, It was as if he had transformed into Duan Lingtian's shadow that followed close behind him. It's you. Through the dim light of the night, Duan Lingtian clearly saw the attire of the person before him and recognized the person. Black-clothed, and a ghost mask on his face. Wasn't this person the ghost-masked man that killed the half-step void stage powerhouse by Duan Rulei's side the other day? According to Duan Lingtian's guess, it was extremely likely that this person was the elusive leader of the ghastly shadow. Of course, it was only a guess. Follow me. A hoarse voice sounded out from the person's mouth. This was also the first time Duan Lingtian had heard the person's voice. Duan Lingtian could still remember that when this ghost-masked man appeared to kill that old man in Duan Rulei's courtyard house that day, from the beginning until the end, he hadn't said a sentence, not a word. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian noticed that the ghost-masked man left with a speed that he could catch up to. Let's go. Even though he didn't know why the ghost-masked man was acting this way, Duan Lingtian still followed with Shang Quan. He could feel that the ghost-masked man bore no ill will towards him. Eventually, the ghost-masked man brought Duan Lingtian into an unoccupied courtyard house, then he walked into a room and lit up the lantern. Did you look for me for something? Duan Lingtian looked at the ghost-masked man before him. Earlier, on the way here, he felt that the ghost-masked man's figure seemed familiar, it was as if he'd seen it before somewhere, but for a moment, he couldn't recall it. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian noticed the ghost-masked man actually extend his hand to take off his mask. The ghost-masked man's true face was completely revealed before Duan Lingtian's eyes. See, Teacher Sima, Duan Lingtian was stupefied. No matter what, he never would have thought that the ghost-masked man that appeared that day was actually the teacher of Paladin Academy's Star Mastermind Department and also the Dean of Paladin Academy, Sima Chongfeng. No wonder he felt like the figure of the ghost-masked man from behind seemed familiar. Sima Chongfeng lightly smiled. Kid, you seem to have offended quite a few people. Duan Lingtian was stunned. Teacher, what do you mean by this? You just arrived in the Imperial City today, right? At dusk, someone came to the Ghastly Shadow's point of operations to buy your life. Sima Chongfeng glanced deeply at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian suddenly laughed. Teacher, you're the leader of Ghastly Shadow. Sima Chongfeng lightly smiled, but he didn't admit nor deny it. But Duan Lingtian already had the answer in his heart. He once thought that Sima Chongfeng was the fourth void stage powerhouse that was concealed within the Crimson Sky Kingdom, but now it would seem that it wasn't so. Sima Chongfeng was precisely the elusive leader of the Ghastly Shadow. Teacher, who bought my life? Duan Lingtian changed questions, and his eyes flickered with a ghastly flowing light. In fact, that person has quite a deep connection with you, Sima Chongfeng said, with a smile. Teacher, stop beating around the bush. Who actually was it? Duan Lingtian laughed bitterly and slightly lost his patience. Now he slightly missed that ghost-masked man that was sparing in speech. Duan Rulei's wife, or in other words, Duan Lingxing's mother. Yun Ping, Sima Chongfeng slowly said. Yun Ping. This name was completely unfamiliar to Duan Lingtian. However, once he knew her identity, he could understand why she wanted to buy his life. Truly like a haunting ghost that just wouldn't go away. Do you need me to deal with it? Sima Chongfeng asked Duan Lingtian, with a spurious smile on his face. Deal with it for free. Duan Lingtian laughed as well. You wish, kid, do you even lack that little money? I naturally have to take money if I help you deal with it, Sima Chongfeng derided. Teacher, Duan Lingtian's expression abruptly went serious. My Uncle Ni seems to not know about you being the leader of Ghastly Shadow. Does His Majesty know? Sima Chongfeng nodded. His Majesty knows. In fact, the Ghastly Shadow was something His Majesty asked me to establish. Teacher Sima, I'm extremely curious, why do you serve the Emperor so willingly? Duan Lingtian asked curiously. He believed that with Sima Chongfeng's strength, he was completely capable of not being under the control of the Emperor. Sima Chongfeng's gaze became misty when he heard Duan Lingtian's question, and he sighed after a long time. That year, it was His Majesty who saved my life, I owe him. Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding, and he didn't ask in detail. This reason was already sufficient. A life-saving kindness was sufficient for someone to be willing to serve another with their own life. Deep into the night, the winds of autumn rustled in the air. Inner city, in an antique-styled inn. The fat married woman paced up and down within a superior room, and every step she took seemed as if it could cause the ground to quake slightly. Little bastard, with ghastly shadow making a move, I'll make you die a graveless death. The voice of the fat married woman revealed gloominess and viciousness. It was as if so long as the person she hated to the bones was before her, she would tear him into 1,000 pieces at the first possible moment. Really? Right at this moment, an icy cold voice echoed out from the roof. Subsequently, the roof was blasted apart. A violet-colored figure flew down to descend into the room. It was precisely Duan Lingtian. Yun Ping noticed the movement and her face went pale. When she noticed Duan Lingtian, her gaze abruptly went cold. Little bastard, it's you. Although she'd never seen Duan Lingtian after he'd grown up, Duan Lingtian's face was 60% or 70% similar to Duan Rufeng's, allowing her to recognize Duan Lingtian with a single glance. Little bastard. Duan Lingtian's eyes went cold and killing intent flickered within. Noticing the killing intent within Duan Lingtian's eyes, Yun Ping shuddered. Only now did she realize that Duan Lingtian was also an origin core martial artist. Instantly, a ghastly pale expression appeared on her fat face, and her fat figure even started to slightly tremble. Duan Lingtian took a large step forward, and in his hand, a jade green grade 8 spirit sword appeared out of thin air, flickering with an icy cold sheen from the moonlight that descended down through the broken roof. Little bastard, I'll kill you and take revenge for Xing. Yun Ping gritted her teeth, and the fat on her entire body trembled as she pounced towards Duan Lingtian, facing death with no regrets. 241 Chapter 242, Bottomless Pit. Bang! Duan Lingtian kicked out when faced with the enormous body that pounced towards him, sending Yun Ping flying out to collide onto the wall. However, Yun Ping, who had a body full of fat as protection, quickly stood up as if she was fine, and she viciously stared at Duan Lingtian. Little bastard, what I regret the most in my life is when forcing your mother out of the Duan clan, I didn't kill you in your cradle. Duan Lingtian frowned. You forced my mother out of the Duan clan. This was something he'd never heard his mother mention before. Exactly, Yun Ping sneered. That year, it was precisely I who instigated the others to force your mother out. I originally thought that you, the little bastard, would be nothing to worry about once you left the Duan clan. I never imagined that after 10 over years, it instead allowed you to become the greatest hidden peril. I regret it. Ah. As she finished speaking, Yun Ping was slightly insane. As far as she was concerned, if she had killed Duan Lingtian when he was still in his cradle that year, all the recent incidents wouldn't have happened. Her most beloved son would be alive as well. HMPH. Duan Lingtian's gaze was cold and indifferent as he spoke in a deep voice. Instead of regretting this, why don't you regret not knowing how to teach your son properly? The hatred between my father and your husband, that's the hatred of the previous generation. But your son instead moved all of this onto me and even attacked me with a killing blow. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have died. As he finished speaking, Duan Lingtian's tone was incomparably low. You little bastard, your life is lowly like grass, so what if my son kills you? Could it be that your life can compare to the life of my son? Yun Ping's eyes revealed insanity. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to take revenge for my son. Otherwise, after I killed you, I would kill your mother. Only then would I be able to vent the hatred in my heart. You're courting death. Duan Lingtian couldn't restrain himself any longer when he heard Yun Ping's vicious words, and his sword flashed out to lodge itself within Yun Ping's body. Every dragon has a reverse scale, touch it and one would absolutely die. His mother was precisely his reverse scale. Bang! Yun Ping's enormous figure crashed onto the ground, causing the inn to sway for a while. Although she had died, her pair of vicious eyes still fiercely stared at Duan Lingtian, seeming like even in death, she wouldn't let Duan Lingtian off. Duan Lingtian swept Yun Ping's corpse with a cold and indifferent gaze. He didn't even have the interest to burn the corpse and destroy the evidence before directly leaving. The next day, a piece of news spread out. The wife of the Duan clan's second master, Duan Rulei, had lost her life in an inn in the inner city. Towards this, the Duan clan didn't make any remarks about it. They only buried Yun Ping out of consideration towards the contributions of Duan Rulei towards the Duan clan in all these years. They more or less were able to guess some of the reasons behind Yun Ping's death. However, they wouldn't investigate the matter. Tian, does your second aunt's death have anything to do with you? In the rear courtyard of his house, Li Ru had a serious expression as she asked Duan Lingtian. Her gaze didn't leave Duan Lingtian's eyes, seeming to want to see if Duan Lingtian would lie to her. I killed her. Duan Lingtian nodded and didn't deny it. This kid, your second uncle has already died and she was just a widow, was there any need to? Li Ru sighed as if she had lost all the strength within her body, and a sense of guilt appeared on her face. Mom, why don't you ask me why I killed her? Duan Lingtian shook his head, then he slowly spoke of what Yunping did. What? She looked for the ghastly shadow to post an assignment to kill you. Li Ru instantly stood up from her seat. She seemed to be totally enraged, and her face was covered with a layer of ice. This Yunping deserved to die. It's fine that she secretly played dirty tricks to force me to leave the Duan clan, I can endure it, but now she actually wanted to kill you. Tian, mother has wrongly blamed you for this matter. You've done well. Li Ru suddenly turning hostile shocked Duan Lingtian as well. But Duan Lingtian could still notice his mother's care from it, and warmth couldn't help but arise within his heart. Mom, do you really not intend to go to the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom with us? Duan Lingtian looked at Li Ru, and he was puzzled towards the decision Li Ru had made last night. Li Ru lightly smiled and said, Tian, Mom won't follow and be a burden to you. Mom, what are you talking about? Duan Lingtian frowned, then he stared at his mother. Wait, you're surely not going because of another reason. Is it because of father? Li Ru didn't conceal it when she saw her son see through her thoughts, and she nodded. Yes, it's because of your father. I have this feeling that your father isn't dead, and one day, he will return to look for me. If I stay in the Imperial City, if he returns, he can find me in the first possible moment. If I leave, where would he go to look for me? Duan Lingtian was speechless. Mom, it's been so many years. Shouldn't you let go of some things? Li Ru was quiet for a moment, then she asked, Tian, you don't believe your father is still alive? This isn't about whether I believe it or not. I hope he's alive as well. However, it's been nearly 20 years since he disappeared now. If he was still alive, he'd have returned long ago. Duan Lingtian laughed bitterly. He naturally hoped that that deadbeat father of his returned. In this way, his mother would be happy as well. However, this hope was extremely small. Tian, you must believe mother. Mother really has a strong feeling. You father will surely return. Li Ru persisted, and her eyes looked at Duan Lingtian in anticipation, seeming to want to obtain Duan Lingtian's approval. Duan Lingtian sighed in his heart, but he still nodded. Mom, I believe you. Father will surely return. Only then did Li Ru's face reveal a smile. Whoosh, whoosh. Right at this moment, a black and a white bolt of lightning flashed over and directly descended onto Duan Lingtian's head. They were precisely little black and little white. Duan Lingtian swung his palm out and grabbed the two little pythons, then he glared as he said, You two little fellows have only just awakened and you've already started being mischievous, huh? Last time, Duan Lingtian refined many origin strengthening pills, and these two little pythons directly swallowed half of them. After doing so, they once again fell into a deep slumber and had awakened a few days ago. Their strength had advanced a step and broke through to the 6th level of the nascent soul stage. If it was a human martial artist or an ordinary fierce beast, even if they were only at the 1st level of the nascent soul stage, there would be no effect no matter how many origin strengthening pills they consumed. These two little pythons seemed to not have such limitations, and to a certain degree, they were simply two gluttons. Of course, Duan Lingtian was still extremely happy towards the origin strengthening pill being able to assist the two little pythons in advancing their strength. The strength of the little pythons advancing would also mean his life would have an extra layer of protection. Although he had Shang Quan, a second-level void-prying martial artist that had comprehended advanced sword force, by his side, Shang Quan was bound to be unable to follow him into the top sects in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. When he arrives at the top sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, he will only be able to rely on himself and the two little pythons that can conceal themselves beneath his sleeve. Come, I still have quite a few origin strengthening pills here. Do you two want to eat them or not? Duan Lingtian withdrew a pile of origin strengthening pills, but he quickly noticed that the two little pythons turned their heads away, refusing to spare them a single glance. You two little fellows, now you dislike origin strengthening pills. Didn't you two eat them rather happily last time? Duan Lingtian derided. But he vaguely guessed some of the reasons behind it. Actually, it wasn't only origin strengthening pills. After the two little pythons ate the origin increasing pills once, they weren't willing to touch the origin increasing pills later on. It was as if eating the origin increasing pills for a second time would have no benefit to them. If it's really because of this, Perhaps I can refine other medicinal pills for them. Even though they wouldn't have as good of an effect as the origin-strengthening pills, it should be useful to them, Duan Lingtian thought in his heart, and an idea arose in his heart. Within the lifelong memories of rebirth Martial Emperor, besides the origin-strengthening pill, there were still 3 other types of medicinal pills that were capable of increasing the speed at which an origin core martial artist cultivated, and they were medicinal pills that he was capable of refining now. Of course, those 3 types of medicinal pills had medicinal effects that were far inferior to the origin-strengthening pill. But he didn't need the medicinal effects of the origin-strengthening pill and instead hoped that the other 3 types of medicinal pills would allow the 2 little pythons' strength to advance a step further. If the medicinal effect wasn't sufficient, then he would use quantity to make it up. If 10 wasn't enough, he'd give them 20, and if 20 wasn't enough, he would give them 50. If 50 wasn't enough, he would give them 100. In any case, these 2 little fellows were gluttons, and they wouldn't die from eating too much. Putting what he thought of into action right away, Duan Lingtian went out with Shang Quan to the medicine store to buy the required medicinal materials. The medicinal materials required for these 3 medicinal pills were ordinary and easy to buy. However, what caught Duan Lingtian by surprise was that as soon as he walked out of the medicine store's door, he saw a familiar face walking straight at him. Xiao He, Xiao Xuan's older brother, the Xiao clan's genius alchemist. That person that was cheated out of 5 million silver 1 year ago in the Alchemist Guild's main guild. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a meaningful smile as he glanced at Xiao He, then he directly left with Shang Quan. Xiao He frowned. Could it be that the violet-clothed young man from before recognized him? But he didn't have the slightest impression of the young man. Shaking his head, Xiao He stopped thinking and walked into the medicine store. No matter what, Xiao He had no way of connecting Duan Lingtian to the violet-clothed youth that cheated him of 5 million silver a year ago. After all, that violet-clothed youth was truly too ordinary looking. Duan Lingtian started getting busy once he returned home. The 3 medicinal pills he wanted to refine were respectively the Cloud Mist Pill, Flowing Water Pill, and Crimson Jade Pill. These 3 medicinal pills had similar medicinal effects, but they were all inferior to the origin-strengthening pill. Whoosh! In next to no time, Duan Lingtian withdrew his cauldron and started refining the medicinal pills. To Duan Lingtian, the medicinal pills he intended to refine now were only ordinary, and every type only required him to spend half an hour to refine around 10 of them. Duan Lingtian spent 2 hours and concentrated on refining 43 Cloud Mist pills. I hope these 2 little fellows are willing to eat, Duan Lingtian said in his heart. Hiss hiss, when he saw the 2 little pythons' eyes light up and violently flick their tongues when they saw the Cloud Mist pills, Duan Lingtian knew that his idea was correct. The 43 Cloud Mist pills were directly shared between the 2 little pythons. Right when Duan Lingtian thought the 2 little pythons would fall into a deep sleep, he instead noticed the 2 little pythons staring at him full of spirit. You 2 little fellows are simply bottomless pits. Duan Lingtian shook his head as he laughed bitterly. He could only continue refining Cloud Mist pills. 242 Chapter 243, Burying the Hatchet. Eventually, under Duan Lingtian's tireless refining, another 100+ Cloud Mist pills were created. After the 2 little pythons shared the Cloud Mist pills, they were finally satisfied. What Duan Lingtian didn't expect was that they didn't fall into a deep slumber this time and instead were full of spirit as they looked at Duan Lingtian with eager eyes. Now the 2 little pythons had started to dislike the Cloud Mist pills. In the following days, Duan Lingtian started refining the Flowing Water pills and Crimson Jade pills. After the 2 little pythons shared and swallowed up over 100 Flowing Water pills and Crimson Jade pills, they were similarly unwilling to eat the Flowing Water pill and Crimson Jade pill anymore. However, they still showed no signs of falling into a deep slumber, and they were full of spirit, brimming with energy and vitality. 2 gluttons. Duan Lingtian was slightly helpless when he looked at the 2 little pythons that stared at him in anticipation, and he suddenly felt that perhaps his idea was a mistake, and the advancement of the strength of the 2 little pythons wasn't so simple. Duan Lingtian placed the remaining Cloud Mist pills, Flowing Water pills, and Crimson Jade pills on the table, and he acted fiercely as he glared at the 2 little pythons and said, "It's all gone. There's only these medicinal pills, so eat them if you want." Hiss hiss, unexpectedly, the 2 little pythons swiftly flicked their tongues, and their 2 little tails flashed out like lightning, sending all the medicinal pills on the table flying. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be stunned when he saw this. You two little fellows, who are you showing your temper to? Duan Lingtian swung out his palm, directly grabbing the two little pythons and throwing them up onto a tree in the rear courtyard. Then he left the rear courtyard while ignoring their protests and returned to his room to cultivate 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, Worm Python Form. In the following 1 month, although Duan Lingtian touched the threshold of the 4th level of the Origin Core stage, he was unable to break through after a long time. On the other hand, with the 2 layers of assistance from the Monkey Wine and Origin Strengthening Pills, Kair smoothly broke through to the 3rd level of the Origin Core stage. As for Li Fei, she was only half a step away from the 3rd level of the Origin Core stage. In this 1 month's time, besides Xiao Lan, who occasionally dropped around to chat with his mother, Duan Lingtian's courtyard house was peaceful as usual. 1 month later, Duan Lingtian left his courtyard house and started slowly going to collect the materials one by one. Starting from the Divine Might Marquis estate, then to the Su clan, then to the Xiao clan. Duan Lingtian and Xiao Xuan had just gotten the materials from the Xiao clan's patriarch when they unexpectedly encountered Xiao He. Little Xuan, this is. Xiao He was slightly surprised when he saw Duan Lingtian. Wasn't this violet-clothed young man the person he met outside a medicine store in the inner city? The violet-clothed youth was handsome and extraordinary and had a graceful bearing, thus he had a deep impression. Brother, he's Duan Lingtian. Xiao Xuan introduced with a smile, then said to Duan Lingtian, this is my brother, Xiao He. So it's Commander Duan. Xiao He was shocked in his heart when he heard what Xiao Xuan said, and a trace of respect appeared on his face. You're Xiao Xuan's brother, so just call me Duan Lingtian, you don't have to be so formal. Duan Lingtian gave Xiao He a friendly smile. He was able to discern that the current Xiao He had indeed changed a lot from the Xiao He that Duan Lingtian encountered in the Alchemist Guild's main guild that time. He'd lost his arrogance and become much more humble. Then I'll call you Brother Lingtian. Xiao He nodded, but when he focused his gaze at Duan Lingtian's eyes and carefully sized them up for a moment, the smile on his face completely froze. This pair of eyes was familiar to him. He wouldn't forget it in his entire lifetime. However, the violet-clothed youth from that day and the violet-clothed young man before him, he was unable to link the two together no matter what. But thinking from another perspective, according to what Xiao Xuan had said, the violet-clothed young man before him had already become a grade 9 alchemist when he was 18. This point coincided with the violet-clothed youth from that day. When Duan Lingtian noticed Xiao He's focused gaze on himself, his heart jerked. This Xiao He seemed to have noticed something. But where did he notice it from? However, Duan Lingtian also noticed that Xiao He seemed to not dare confirm it after a long time. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled when he saw the puzzled expression in Xiao He's eyes grow deeper, and with a raise of his hand, a stack of silver in his palm, precisely 5 million silver. He then passed it to Xiao He. This money now can be considered to be returned to its rightful owner. You really are. Xiao He didn't move to receive the silver. Instead, his pupils constricted as if he'd seen a ghost. Brother, what's wrong? Duan Lingtian, why are you giving my brother money? The nearby Xiao Xuan had a bewildered expression, he didn't know what had happened. Little Xuan, he's the violet-clothed youth that made a bet with me in the Alchemist Guild and earned 5 million silver from me. I had noticed earlier that Brother Lingtian's eyes were exactly the same as the youth from that day. I didn't dare confirm it earlier, but I never imagined that they were actually the same person. Unbelievable. A bitter smile appeared on Xiao He's face, as he never imagined that when he met the genius youth alchemist from that day once again, it would be under such circumstances. Xiao Xuan was stupefied. Brother, didn't you say that the youth from that day had an ordinary appearance? This is something you might have to ask Brother Lingtian. Xiao He glanced deeply at Duan Lingtian with a complicated gaze. Duan Lingtian. Xiao Xuan looked at Duan Lingtian with a bewildered expression. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled. For the sake of not allowing others to find out my identity, I used some methods to make a disguise that day. However, I never imagined that he'd actually remember my eyes. As he finished speaking, Duan Lingtian looked at Xiao He with a surprised expression. He finally found out how Xiao He recognized him. He could put on a disguise, but it only changed his face, whereas his eyes didn't change in the slightest. Actually, after I lost the gamble to you that day, I was extremely furious in my heart and wished for nothing more than to take revenge on you. So, before I left, I deeply remembered your face, your eyes, and your everything. Xiao He shook his head and laughed, and as he recalled that day, he felt as if he'd change a lot. What? Don't want to take revenge on me now? Duan Lingtian joked. Xiao He shook his head. After I returned to the clan that day, I thought about many things. In the end, I realized that I was indeed too arrogant in the past and had an exaggerated opinion of my abilities. In fact, I want to thank you, as it's you that allowed me to realize my flaws. Like the old saying, nothing is better than being able to notice and rectify oneself after making a mistake. Xiao He, you have such a mentality, so I believe that in the future you'll surely be able to develop your own school in the Tao of Alchemy and stand at the peak of the Crimson Sky Kingdom. Duan Lingtian looked more highly upon Xiao He after hearing what he said. Xiao He nodded and said modestly, I wish. In the end, Xiao He wasn't willing to take the silver from Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian didn't force him either and instead guided Xiao He in medicine refinement for a bit. Needless to say, Xiao He indeed had a high natural talent in medicine refinement, so he quickly understood Duan Lingtian's guidance in many aspects. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but secretly praise him in his heart. Xiao He had a heartfelt admiration towards the profound understanding that Duan Lingtian had of the Tao of Alchemy, and when Duan Lingtian left, he even personally sent Duan Lingtian out of the Shao clan estate's gate. The two of them could be considered to have buried the hatchet. After leaving the Shao clan estate, Duan Lingtian went to the imperial palace. Within the imperial garden, the emperor passed a spatial ring to Duan Lingtian. These are all the reserves within the imperial palace, as well as the materials I ordered people to gather from all over. After expressing his gratitude, Duan Lingtian lightly smiled as he asked, Thank you, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, how much were these materials? Money. The emperor shook his head and waved his hand. There's no need for money. If you're considerate, then go see Bai Yao before leaving. Duan Lingtian was startled, but he understood what the emperor meant, and he nodded. When he met Princess Bai Yao once again, Duan Lingtian noticed that Princess Bai Yao's body was obviously weaker and thinner, and even Duan Lingtian couldn't help feel pity upon seeing her. Princess. Duan Lingtian bowed to Princess Bai Yao. A pleasantly surprised expression appeared on Princess Bai Yao's face when she saw Duan Lingtian. You've come. Duan Lingtian lightly nodded and sighed in his heart. There were some things that were like unintentionally inserting a willow branch into the ground and the willow becoming a source of shade. Needless to say, Princess Bai Yao was extremely outstanding and very kind, not one bit inferior to Ke and Li Fei. However, it was difficult for him to take that final step in his heart in the end. One step, although it was very close, it seemed far in the horizon. When do you intend to leave? Princess Bai Yao asked, in a low voice. Her clear and melodious voice trembled slightly, and her delicate and touching bearing caused one to be unable to stop oneself from feeling tender and protective towards her. Tomorrow morning, Duan Lingtian lightly said. So soon, Princess Bai Yao's delicate body trembled, and she snuck a peek at Duan Lingtian. When she noticed Duan Lingtian looking over as well, she timidly turned her head away, seeming extremely like a small child that was caught eating candy, and her beautiful face blushed red. Duan Lingtian's gaze twitched, and he slowly said, Princess, I'll accompany you on a stroll. Okay. Princess Bai Yao obediently nodded. Unlike in the past, this time, Duan Lingtian accompanied Princess Bai Yao to walk and chat for a long time. And the two of them understood each other a little bit more. Duan Lingtian even intentionally spoke about himself with Ke and Li Fei. He originally thought that Princess Bai Yao would feel a sense of loss. But unexpectedly, Princess Bai Yao's face had a trace of a smile from the beginning until the end. In other words, big sister Li Fei and Ke will be accompanying you to the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Yes. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled as he nodded, and the corners of his mouth curled into a smile of happiness. But he instead didn't notice that in the instant that Princess Bai Yao turned her head away, a flowing light that had a sense of jealousy mixed within was vaguely present deep within her beautiful eyes. As if she wished for nothing more than to be able to replace Ke or Li Fei and accompany Duan Lingtian by his side. Will you ever return? When they were bidding their farewells, Princess Bai Yao asked in a light voice, and her beautiful face had a trace of a perturbed expression. I'll surely return. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled. This time, my mother won't be leaving with me. When I'm free in the future, I'll return to see her. Princess Bai Yao's eyes lit up when she heard what he said. Can I go meet your mother? Duan Lingtian was stunned. Only now did Princess Bai Yao realize that she was too straightforward, and the blush on her face grew deeper. It seemed as if blood would drip out from her face. 243 Chapter 244, Earth Dragon's Shield. Duan Lingtian was in a slightly difficult situation. If he were to bring Princess Bai Yao home, would Little Fei skin him? Duan Lingtian felt a chill run down his spine when he recalled Little Fei's jealousy. However, when he saw Princess Bai Yao looking at him with a delicate and touching gaze and a face full of anticipation, his heart softened in the end. Just take her as a guest. Duan Lingtian consoled himself. As expected, when Duan Lingtian brought Princess Bai Yao back to his home, Li Fei's gaze became vigilant at the first possible moment. Li Ru's face instead had a trace of a dubious smile. Xiao Lan happened to be accompanying Li Ru, and when she saw Princess Bai Yao, a trace of shock appeared on her peerlessly beautiful face. She's never imagined that a woman Duan Lingtian casually brought home would have an appearance that wasn't inferior to hers, K.'s, and Li Fei's. Young master, who's this beautiful big sister? K.'r blinked her big eyes and looked at Princess Bai Yao as she asked Duan Lingtian. This is Princess Bai Yao. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled as he introduced Princess Bai Yao to the women in his home. Instantly, they were all moved. Even Li Fei's face revealed surprise, as she never thought that the woman Duan Lingtian brought home would actually be Princess Bai Yao. Li Fei had heard of Princess Bai Yao, the #1 beauty in the imperial city. Greetings, Princess. For a moment, including Li Ru, all the 4 women lightly bowed to Princess Bai Yao as they respectfully addressed her. Princess Bai Yao walked over with graceful steps to help Li Ru up and lightly smiled as she said, Aunt Ru, this isn't the imperial palace, so you don't have to treat me as a princess. Li Ru lightly smiled and nodded. Her beautiful eyes were like water as her gaze descended onto Duan Lingtian. Vaguely mixed within her gaze was a dubious expression, causing Duan Lingtian to feel slightly embarrassed. Your big sister Fei, right? Princess Bai Yao looked at Li Fei, and her delicate and touching expression caused Li Fei to be unable to help herself from revealing a light smile. Princes, you know me. Big sister Fei, you're as beautiful as Duan Lingtian said. Princess Bai Yao's mouth was even sweeter than honey, completely eliminating the hostility and vigilance Li Fei had towards her. Big sister Fei, call me Bai Yao in the future. Okay, little sister Bai Yao, you're extremely beautiful as well, as expected of the imperial city's #1 beauty. Li Fei lightly nodded, and a favorable impression arose within her heart when she saw that Princess Bai Yao didn't put on airs in the slightest. Princess Bai Yao looked at K.'r and asked, with a light smile, you're K.'r, right? I heard Duan Lingtian say that you're the same age as me. What month were you born? Princess, my birthday is in September. The current K.'r wasn't the K.'r from the past anymore. Even when facing a princess, she wasn't perturbed in the slightest and was able to chat without restraint. Then I'm younger than you. My birthday is in December. In the future, I'll call you Big Sister K.'r. You can call me Little Sister Bai Yao like how Big Sister Li Fei calls me. Princess Bai Yao playfully stuck out her cute tongue when she heard what K.'r said, causing K.'r to have a favorable impression of her as well. Ah, I have a little sister as well now, K.'r exclaimed in a low voice. Her beautiful face was slightly red, and the light smile that the corners of her mouth curled into had a trace of excitement mixed within. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but sigh emotionally when he saw this scene. As expected of someone from the imperial family, Princess Bai Yao was indeed skilled in managing affairs with people, and it wasn't long before she obtained the approval of the 3 beauties within Duan Lingtian's house. Princess Bai Yao looked at Xiao Lan in the end. Even Princess Bai Yao couldn't help but have a favorable impression towards this woman who was like a celestial maiden that had fallen into the mortal world. Today, the shock in her heart had practically never stopped. Originally, as the publicly acknowledged #1 beauty in the imperial city, Princess Bai Yao was extremely confident of her appearance. But today, she successively saw 3 women with appearances that weren't inferior to hers. Besides Duan Lingtian's 2 women, who she already knew of, the appearance of this beautiful and refined woman caused her heart to ripple. She noticed that this woman was similar to her and was attracted to Duan Lingtian. For a moment, a feeling of mutual sympathy towards a fellow sufferer arose within her heart. Princess, I'm Xiao Lan. Xiao Lan lightly smiled to Princess Bai Yao. She felt slightly bitter in her heart. She was naturally able to discern Princess Bai Yao's thoughts towards Duan Lingtian, and she was extremely jealous of how Princess Bai Yao was capable of obtaining the approval of Duan Lingtian's family in such a short amount of time. After all, she and Duan Lingtian's family had been together for a few months, but she had only obtained Li Ru's and K.'r's approval. Li Fei was constantly vigilant towards her big sister Xiao Lan. Princess Bai Yao smiled sweetly to Xiao Lan. That, all of you chat, I'm going back to my room to cultivate. A bitter smile appeared on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth when he saw that he had become a prop to them. He notified them and returned to his room. As the saying goes, 3 women is the best amount for women to discuss amongst themselves. These 4 women gathered together, in the earth that Duan Lingtian was from in his past life, would be able to form a table for mahjong. After returning to his room, Duan Lingtian started cultivation, the 3rd form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign technique, the Worm Python form supplementary martial skill. Defensive martial skill, Earth Dragon's Shield. This Earth Dragon's Shield was extremely domineering. Even though it didn't have the ability to reverse and move attacks like greater teleportation, in terms of defense, it was a level stronger than an ordinary high-grade profound rank defensive martial skill. Even if the Earth Dragon's Shield was only at the mastery stage, its defense could match an ordinary high-grade profound rank martial skill at the perfection stage. My greater teleportation relied upon the medicinal effect of the blood Lingzi to break through to its current perfection stage. According to Rebirth Martial Emperor's memories, if I refine an inverse source pill, I can once again stimulate the medicinal strength of the blood Lingzi within my fleshly body, vital energy, and blood. The materials for the inverse source pill were on the list of materials that Duan Lingtian asked all the powers to gather 1 month ago. Duan Lingtian withdrew his cauldron and started refining the inverse source pill. After an hour, the inverse source pill was completed. Subsequently, he consumed the pill and started stimulating the medicinal strength of the blood Lingji that was concealed within his fleshly body, vital energy, and blood. At the same time, he started circulating the Earth Dragon's Shield. In the end, under the assistance of the vast amounts of medicinal strength from the blood Lingzi, the Earth Dragon's Shield smoothly broke through to the perfection stage. Although the Earth Dragon's Shield is much stronger than an ordinary high-grade profound rank martial skill, in the origin core stage, when strength is raised to a certain level, even if the defensive martial skill is stronger, it will at most only be capable of neutralizing a portion of the strength. This was something Duan Lingtian was clear of in his heart. Based on Duan Lingtian's estimations, with his current cultivation at the 3rd level of the origin core stage, if he were to circulate the Earth Dragon's Shield at full force, he would be able to completely neutralize the attack of a martial artist below the origin core stage. However, if it was an attack from an origin core martial artist, then it would be impossible to completely neutralize the attack. He could only neutralize a portion of his opponent's attack. But even then, the defensive martial skill was still important. For example, in a battle between 2 martial artists with similar cultivation levels and attack strength. If one of the 2 people didn't cultivate a defensive martial skill and the other person did, under these circumstances, the latter would absolutely obtain a firm victory against the former. Duan Lingtian returned to his senses after completing the cultivation of the Earth Dragon's Shield. Meanwhile, he noticed that the sky had turned dark. I forgot the time. Duan Lingtian was slightly embarrassed as he walked out of his room, and after he had dinner with the girls, he proposed to send Princess Bai Yao back. As for Xiao Lan, she chose to stay. Duan Lingtian didn't feel anything towards Xiao Lan's decision, and what was rare was that Li Fei didn't mind. After Duan Lingtian took Princess Bai Yao back and returned, only then did he know why Li Fei was suddenly so magnanimous. We're leaving tomorrow. With Xiao Lan accompanying Aunt Ru won't be so lonely. What Li Fei said caused Duan Lingtian to be extremely moved. That night, after Duan Lingtian and Li Fei had a good time together, Li Fei lied on his shoulder and said, in a low voice, "Scoundrel, I know that Xiao Lan and little sister Bai Yao are attracted to you." "Little Fei, what are you talking about?" Duan Lingtian embraced Li Fei in his arms and rubbed her beautiful hair. "This little bottle of vinegar. HMPH. You dare say you don't have any thoughts?" Li Fei's watery, beautiful eyes squinted as she glared at Duan Lingtian, causing Duan Lingtian to smile bitterly. As a normal man, how could he not have any thoughts when he saw 2 beauties? Moreover, those 2 beauties were so kind and lovely. Li Fei's expression went serious as she said, "I've thought it through." "Thought what though?" Duan Lingtian felt a slight chill run down his back. This little Fei wouldn't have some insane idea, right? "I've thought it through, that if they want to enter our family, then they must first pass my test." Li Fei smiled mysteriously, with an appearance that showed that she felt a feeling of superiority. "What test?" Duan Lingtian asked curiously. "Secret." Li Fei rolled her eyes at Duan Lingtian and didn't say anything else. At dawn the next day, Duan Ling Tian brought Ke Li Fei, and Shang Quan to say their farewells to Li Ru, Xiao Lan, and his house manager, Jing Ru, before spurring their horses to leave the courtyard house and leave the imperial city. As for the other people, Duan Ling Tian had already bid his farewells to them one by one 2 days ago. The domain of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom was situated to the northeast of the Crimson Sky Kingdom, and Duan Ling Tian's group of 4 dashed onwards on Fergana horses, as if transforming into 4 red bolts of lightning that kicked up endless amounts of dirt into the air. Hiss hiss, inside Duan Ling Tian's sleeve, the 2 little pythons disobediently came out and excitedly flicked their tongues in incomparable joy. You 2 little fellow know that we're about to leave the Crimson Sky Kingdom as well. Duan Ling Tian looked at the 2 little pythons and shook his head with a smile. Unexpectedly, the 2 little pythons nodded to him like humans and were extremely playful. Shang Quan, if we travel by Fergana horse and rest in the night, how long will it take for us to arrive at the 7-star sword sect? Duan Ling Tian asked Shang Quan as he spurred his horse forward. The 7-star sword sect was one of the top 5 sects in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Over 90% of the disciples within the 7-star sword sect were sword cultivators. Because the attack strength of sword cultivators was extremely strong, the 7-star sword sect was extremely domineering within the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Even the other 4 top sects didn't dare rashly offend the 7-star sword sect. Duan Ling Tian heard of all this from Shang Quan. According to what Shang Quan said, the influence of the 7-star sword sect within the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom was only inferior to the imperial family. Most importantly, the 7-star sword sect would recruit outer court disciples every 6 months, much more frequently than the other 4 top sects. However, even then, the members of the 7-star sword sect were far lesser than the other 4 top sects. The 7-star sword sect was famous for being extremely harsh when recruiting outer court disciples. 244 Chapter 245, Black Wind City. Shang Quan pondered for a moment, then he said to Duan Ling Tian, around half a year. Duan Ling Tian nodded. He was already mentally prepared for this answer. It would take 3 months to arrive at the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's domain from the Crimson Sky Kingdom's Imperial City, and going from the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's border to the 7-star sword sect was still quite a long distance. Duan Ling Tian's group of 3 had the protection of Shang Quan, this 2nd-level void-prying stage powerhouse that had comprehended advanced sword force, so they didn't encounter any trouble during the journey from Crimson Sky Kingdom to the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Occasionally, when bandits dashed over, they would be completely slaughtered by Shang Quan. Similar to Duan Ling Tian's expectations, after 3 months, they arrived at a city that was situated between the Crimson Sky Kingdom and the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Even though this city wasn't a county city of the Crimson Sky Kingdom, the area it occupied wasn't smaller than a county city. Shang Quan, have you been to this city before? Duan Ling Tian asked. Shang Quan shook his head. Let's go inside. Duan Ling Tian's brows rose, then he directly entered the city with the 2 little girls who wore veils to cover their faces. This city was extremely bustling, and many traveling merchants could be seen going in and out of it. According to Duan Ling Tian's guess, these traveling merchants ought to be going back and forth between the Crimson Sky Kingdom and the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. After entering the city, people riding Fergana horses could be seen everywhere, thus Duan Ling Tian's group of 4 riding Fergana horses into the city didn't draw the attention of other people. Under Duan Ling Tian's lead, the 4 of them found a restaurant to have a meal. Before ordering the dishes, Duan Ling Tian gave the restaurant attendant a small tip and asked curiously, "Introduce this city to me." The attendant would naturally speak of all he knew without reserve when he saw Duan Ling Tian be so generous, and he lightly smiled. "Customer, is this the first time you've come to our Black Wind City?" Black Wind City, Duan Ling Tian's brows raised, and he continued to listen to the attendant. "Customer, our Black Wind City is a border merchant city under the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. It is situated on the northeast border of the Crimson Sky Kingdom. Normally, some of the traveling merchants that go back and forth between the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom and the Crimson Sky Kingdom rest in our Black Wind City," the attendant slowly said. Duan Ling Tian nodded. This was something he'd noticed on the way here earlier. The attendant continued, "Customer, since it's your first time in our Black Wind City, you must remember. Never offend people with the surnames Huang, Zhang, or Ma." As he spoke up to this point, the attendant's face was slightly serious. "What's special about these 3 surnames?" Duan Ling Tian asked curiously. The attendant shook his head. There isn't anything special. These surnames are precisely the surnames of the 3 great clans in our Black Wind City. Customer, you ought to be from the Crimson Sky Kingdom, right? How do you know? Duan Lingtian was slightly surprised. The attendant smiled as he said, because people who are heading to the Crimson Sky Kingdom from the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom mostly follow traveling merchants on their journey, and there are hardly any individual travelers. So I guessed customer was from the Crimson Sky Kingdom. Customer intends to head to the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Exactly. Duan Lingtian nodded. Customer, be sure to remember what I said earlier. Even though Black Wind City's 3 great clans are nothing in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, they're much stronger than many clans from your Crimson Sky Kingdom. Even to the extent that they're only inferior to the 3 top clans of the Crimson Sky Kingdom's Imperial City. The attendant reminded again. I understand. Duan Lingtian nodded, and the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. He naturally knew that the 3 top clans of the Crimson Sky Kingdom that the attendant spoke of were precisely the Duan clan, the Shao clan, and the Su clan. Not to mention an existence that was inferior to the 3 great clans. With Shangquan here, Duan Lingtian wasn't even afraid of the 3 great clans themselves. Customer, what are all of you eating? The attendant asked respectfully. Help us choose a few, we don't avoid any foods, Duan Lingtian said to the attendant. Duan Lingtian looked at the 2 little girls beside him and lightly smiled as he said, it's time to eat, take off your veils. The 2 little girls blinked their beautiful eyes, then they obediently removed the veils on their faces. And right at this moment, sounds of cups dropping echoed out within the restaurant. It was some of the male customers being completely dumbstruck when they saw Kair and Li Fei, and they even weren't aware that the cups in their hands had fallen. In next to no time, their food had arrived. Shangquan, sit down and eat, Duan Lingtian said to Shangquan, and Shangquan replied before sitting down. The 4 of them had been hungry for a day, thus they were like whirlwinds that swept away the clouds, sweeping away the food on the table. Meanwhile, the sky slowly dimmed, but the restaurant was still brightly lit by lanterns. I heard that the auction in the Ma Clan auction house tonight will have a batch of slaves on auction. I've heard of it as well. Not only are there slaves, but allegedly the Ma Clan auction house has many good things this time. Hurry up and finish eating, let's go have a look. Right at this moment, the discussion of a few middle-aged men from a nearby table entered Duan Lingtian's ears. Ma Clan auction house. Auction. Duan Lingtian was suddenly interested. This Black Wind City was a city that was situated at the border between the Crimson Sky Kingdom and the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, so there were extremely large amounts of traveling merchants that had passed here. Thus, there would surely have been many traveling merchants that had sold off some good things here. Perhaps some things that he'd be interested in would appear during the auction. After eating their fill, Duan Lingtian waved his hand at the attendant. Customer, do you have any instructions? The attendant asked Duan Lingtian respectfully. I want to ask you this, if I want to participate in the Ma Clan auction house's auction, what should I do? Duan Lingtian went straight to the point, and at the same time, he put down a silver ingot. The attendant's eyes lit up, and after putting away the silver, he hurriedly said, Customer, there are 3 great auction houses within our Black Wind City, and they're respectively controlled by the 3 great clans. Every auction house holds an auction every 3 months. The 2 months in between are left for the other 2 auction houses to hold their auctions. In other words, there's an action in Black Wind City every month. Tonight just happens to be the day the Ma Clan auction house holds an auction, and customer can be considered to have come at the right time. After exiting our restaurant door, take a left turn and walk to the end of the street, then turn right and you can see the Ma Clan auction house. There are 2 grades of entrance fees to the Ma Clan auction house. The first, spend 1,000 silver to obtain the right to bid and to sit on a seat in the hall. The second, spend 100,000 silver to obtain the right to bid, and the Ma Clan will provide a private room and the most comprehensive service. As he spoke up to this point, the attendant couldn't help but be amazed. To him, Black Wind City's auction house was something he wouldn't have the opportunity to enter in his entire lifetime. Just a normal seat requires 1,000 silver. Duan Lingtian's eyes squinted and were slightly surprised. And that private room actually required 100,000 silver. After leaving the Crimson Sky Kingdom, the worth of silver has lowered too sharply, right? Duan Lingtian nodded, then he brought along the 2 girls that had put on their veils and walked out of the restaurant. Shangquan led the 4 Fergana horses and followed behind them. Duan Lingtian's group of 4 directly went to the Ma clan auction house. Meanwhile, the Ma clan auction house had already started allowing guests to enter. However, there weren't many people were entering, as there was still a period of time before the auction started. At the auction house door, a row of attendants stood there like bellboys. Duan Lingtian's group of 4 had only just arrived at the auction house's door when an attendant came forward and greeted them, then they received the reins of the 4 Fergana horses from Shangquan. Another attendant walked up and asked respectfully, "Guest, may I know if you need seats in the hall, or a private room?" "A private room," Duan Lingtian said to the attendant. "Guest, please follow me." The attendant's attitude became even more humble when he heard what Duan Lingtian said. He led Duan Lingtian's group to enter the auction house, then he brought them to the private rooms on the 2nd floor of the auction house. The clean and tidy room gave one a comfortable feeling. The room was extremely vast and was more than sufficient to fit Duan Lingtian's group of 4. Duan Lingtian walked around the room, and through the window in the room, he was able to see the auction platform below, which was extremely convenient. After the attendant entered, he started pouring hot tea for Duan Lingtian and the 2 little girls, then he prepared some refreshments before respectfully standing at the side. After a short moment, the sound of the door being knocked on echoed out. The attendant walked out in large strides to open the room door, then he respectfully greeted the person outside. "Manager." A middle-aged man with a face full of stubble slowly walked in, then he looked at Duan Lingtian. "Guest, nice to meet you. I'm the Ma clan auction house's manager, Ma Qin." Duan Lingtian naturally was able to guess the reason why the manager of the auction house had come. With a raise of his hand, 100,000 silver appeared out of thin air, and he passed it to Ma Qin. When Ma Qin received the silver, his gaze abruptly shone. The first thought that flashed within his mind was that this young man that looked to be not even 20 wasn't simple. Having a spatial ring at such a young age, his background was obviously extraordinary. "Thank you, guest." After Ma Qin put away the silver, he deeply glanced at Shangquan, who was behind Duan Lingtian, then turned around and left. "Guests, if you have any needs, feel free to instruct me, I'll be guarding outside the door," the attendant said respectfully, then he walked out and closed the door. Meanwhile, K'er and Li Fei removed their veils. "We need to spend 100,000 silver just to stay in this lousy place for a few hours." Li Fei shook her head. She felt it difficult to accept this fact. Although K'er didn't say anything, her face was still filled with astonishment. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled. This was something he could understand. After all, this place couldn't be compared to those cities within the Crimson Sky Kingdom. Up to a certain extent, this place could be considered a city of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Moreover, this Black Wind City was a place that traveling merchants must traverse. Thus, the standard of expenses here would probably not be much different from those cities within the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. This was something Duan Lingtian had already noticed when he paid the bill at the restaurant. "It's still not starting." After half an hour, Li Fei's beautiful brows frowned and she was slightly impatient. 245 Chapter 246, An Origin Strengthening Pill. "It should be soon." Duan Lingtian's brows raised, seeming to have noticed something. Meanwhile, through the room's window, people could be vaguely seen walking into the hall with large strides and finding a seat. As time went by, more and more people arrived. Before long, the hall was filled with a dense crowd of people. The seats in the hall are 1,000 silver each. Just from the entrance fees, this Ma clan auction house is able to receive money until their hands go soft. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be astonished. When there were many people in one place, it would naturally become extremely noisy. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian noticed an old man slowly walking up the auction platform. And he knew that the auction was about to begin. "Everyone, welcome to our Ma clan auction house. I guarantee to everyone that today, you will all feel that your time wasn't wasted." As expected, after walking up the auction platform, the old man spouted out a bunch of worthless nonsense. Nothing other than advertising and praising how great the items for auction in their Ma clan auction house today were. This was nothing more than ringing one's own bell. "Alright, I can see that everyone can't want. The first auction item will be presented right now." The old man's voice abruptly sounded. For a moment, the people that were dozing off in the hall shuddered and woke up. A young girl held a tray that was covered by a red cloth in her hand as she walked up the auction platform. When the young girl lifted up the red cloth, the item on the tray appeared before the eyes of everyone, and it was a pill bottle. The old man picked up the pill bottle, swept the hall with his gaze, and then said, with a clear voice, "Everyone, within this pill bottle are 10 origin strengthening pills. The origin strengthening pill, a medicinal pill used by origin core martial artists. It is able to increase their speed of cultivation. However, even in the medicine stores, origin strengthening pills were sold everywhere." For a moment, many people lacked any interest. And there were even people who said in disdain, when did the Ma clan auction house decline to such a level? Actually auctioning such a common item. Origin strengthening pills are sold at medicine stores at 10,000 silver each and are sold at prices that are marked clearly. Exactly, there's no need to auction this kind of item, right? Hurry up and change it to the next auction item. The crowd of people in hall started shouting out. "Everyone, please be silent." The old man's expression didn't change when faced with such a scene, even to the extent that he seemed to have known since long ago that this would happen. When the old man raised his hand, the hall quieted down. "Everyone, do all of you think that our Ma clan auction house would auction an ordinary origin strengthening pill?" The old man's eyes squinted, then he lightly smiled. "Everyone knows that medicinal pills refined by ordinary alchemists have a purity that's a little over 60% at most. And being able to possess a purity of 65% is extremely hard to come by. However, the origin strengthening pills in the pill bottle in my hand have a purity that has achieved 75%. 75%? What sort of notion is that? Once an origin strengthening pill with a 75% purity is consumed and used to cultivate, the increase in cultivation speed is double the speed of an ordinary origin strengthening pill. If it were to be given to an origin core martial artist who was trapped in a bottleneck and unable to break through after a long time, if they consumed this origin strengthening pill, they would have the possibility to directly break through. As expected, the old man's words caused a stir within the hall. 75% purity origin strengthening pill. Is it real or fake? Which alchemist is so formidable? Who is able to refine an origin strengthening pill with such high purity? Many people within the hall didn't quite believe it. As far as they knew, a medicinal pill with a purity at 70% could already be considered an existence of rumor. A medicinal pill with a purity of 75% was already close to the 80% purity medicinal pills of legend. Seeing this, the old man continued, "Everyone, these 10 origin strengthening pills have been personally tested and verified by our Ma clan's Lord Hujun. So there's no need for everyone to worry whether the purity of these medicinal pills conform to what this old man has said. Among these 10 origin strengthening pills, 7 have a purity of 75% and 3 have a purity that is extremely close to 76%. Moreover, our Ma clan's trustworthiness is recognized by everyone." Many people within the hall nodded upon hearing the old man's words. The Ma clan indeed hadn't done anything untrustworthy during their auctions. Since Lord Hujun has tested and verified it, there's naturally no problem. Exactly, Lord Hujun is the only grade 7 alchemist in Black Wind City. His judgment would surely not be wrong. "Geezer Ma, hurry up and announce the starting bid." The people in the hall spoke out, urging the old man to announce the starting bid. Within the room, a trace of surprise appeared on Duan Lingtian's face. 75% purity. He'd never imagined that such a high-purity medicinal pill could appear in the border between the Crimson Sky Kingdom and the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. A purity of 75% was sufficient to show that the alchemist that refined the origin strengthening pill was an alchemist with rich experience and extraordinary natural talent. Of course, Duan Lingtian looked down upon this little bit of purity. Not to mention a 75% purity, even a purity of 90% was something he could freely refine. If he were to seriously refine the medicinal pill, it would even be possible for him to refine a medicinal pill with a purity of 99%. The lifetime of experience and ability in medicine refining that he obtained from Rebirth Martial Emperor was no joke. Aren't they embarrassed from auctioning a medicinal pill with only 75% purity? Li Fei grunted in a low voice. She still remembered that the origin strengthening pills her man refined had a purity that exceeded 90%. As far as she was concerned, an origin strengthening pill with a purity of 75% was simply trash compared to the origin strengthening pills her man had refined. But even though it was trash, the bid price shocked Li Fei. Along with the old man announcing the big price, the 10 origin strengthening pills with 75% purity were actually bid to a high price of 300,000 silver. Not only that, the bidding was still going on. 400,000 silver. 500,000 silver. Li Fei was stupefied when she heard the bidding in the hall. Madmen, they're surely madmen. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled. He understood what she was thinking. To a certain extent, an origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 75% was indeed capable of assisting an origin core martial artist in breaking through the final bottleneck and smoothly step into the next level. Of course, it was only limited to martial artists at the first level and second level of the origin core stage. After all, it was only an origin-strengthening pill with 75% purity. 1 million silver. Finally, after a deep voice sounded out of one of the rooms on the second floor, the bottle of origin-strengthening pills with 75% purity was won by that person. The guest in room number 5 has obtained this bottle of origin-strengthening pills with 75% purity. The old man on the auction platform announced. Subsequently, another young girl held a tray as she ascended the auction platform. The auction item this time was a grade 8 spirit weapon that provided an 18% amplification. Duan Lingtian's group was without a shred of interest towards this auction item. Scoundrel, those 10 origin-strengthening pills with only 75% purity were actually able to sell for 1 million silver. If the origin-strengthening pills you refined were to be sold, wouldn't they be worth even more money? After Li Fei recovered from her shock, she looked at Duan Lingtian with a pair of beautiful eyes that had traces of bright lights within. Duan Lingtian smiled as he said, "Of course. One origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 75% is worth 100,000 silver. I wonder how much the origin-strengthening pills with over 90% purity that you refine are able to sell for." Li Fei had a curious expression. It was as if she urgently wanted to know the answer. Duan Lingtian was, of course, able to see through Li Fei's thoughts, and he shook his head with a smile. "Little Fei, if you really want to know, then I'll choose an origin-strengthening pill with the lowest purity to give the Ma clan auction house to auction out. I assume that they would be interested as well." Li Fei's beautiful eyes shone, and the nearby Kair had a face full of curiosity. "Shang Quan, call the attendant in," Duan Lingtian instructed Shang Quan. In next to no time, the attendant entered. "Guest, do you have any instructions?" Duan Lingtian raised his hand and a pill bottle appeared in it, then he passed it to the attendant. "There's a medicinal pill within. I intend to auction it away in your auction house. Ask the manager to arrange it." Without asking anything, the attendant extended his hand to receive it after hearing what Duan Lingtian said. He knew what to ask and what not to ask. After the attendant left, Duan Lingtian looked at the auction platform again and noticed that the grade 8 spirit weapon had been bid away. Manager. After the attendant received the pill bottle from Duan Lingtian, he went to look for the manager, Ma Qin. Ma Qin's gaze descended onto the attendant's hand, and he asked. "A guest wants to auction an item." "Yes, manager, it's that young guest," the attendant respectfully said. "Young guest, that violet-clothed young man?" Ma Qin asked curiously. "Yes." The attendant nodded. Ma Qin received the pill bottle and opened it to take a look. He couldn't help but frown when he noticed that it was actually an origin-strengthening pill within. What does that guest mean by this? Origin-strengthening pill, and only one. In the end, he didn't send this origin-strengthening pill back directly after all and instead took it to the back of the auction house. Lord Hu Jun. Before long, Ma Qin found the only grade 7 alchemist in their Ma clan, Hu Jun. So long as the Ma clan auction house was carrying out an auction, Hu Jun would be in charge. Yes, Hu Jun was an old man past 70, and he asked in wonder when he saw Ma Qin arrive, "Manager Qin, is something the matter?" Ma Qin passed over the pill bottle in his hand. "Lord Hu Jun, this is an auction item that one of our guests wants to auction off in our auction house. Help me see if it's special in any way." Hu Jun received the pill bottle and asked curiously, "What's this?" Origin-strengthening pill. The corners of Ma Qin's mouth curled into a bitter smile. Origin-strengthening pill. Hu Jun couldn't help but be stupefied, then he frowned. Is this a joke? Which guest wants to auction this? Unless it's an origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 70% and above, there's no value in auctioning it. Ma Qin was slightly embarrassed as he said, "Lord Hu Jun, the guest that wants to auction this origin-strengthening pill seems to have an extraordinary background, so I didn't directly send it back to him. Help me take a look first. If it's really not good, then I'll send it back to him." Hu Jun nodded, then he opened the pill bottle and poured out the medicinal pill from within. When he saw that there was only one origin-strengthening pill within, Hu Jun was stupefied, and then his face flushed red. Is that guest intentionally playing tricks on our Ma clan auction house? One origin-strengthening pill. does he really think his origin strengthening pill has a purity of 80% or above? 246 Chapter 247, Extreme Shock. Ma Qin wasn't surprised that Hu Jun got enraged, as he was already mentally prepared. Manager Qin, quickly return this origin strengthening pill. Isn't this just intentionally making trouble? Hu Jun took a deep breath and stuffed the origin strengthening pill in his hand back into the pill bottle, then he covered it up once again before passing it to Ma Qin. Ma Qin didn't take it from him and said, Lord Hu Jun, you'd better just examine it according to usual practice. You acting like this doesn't conform to the rules. Hu Jun frowned and asked, in a low voice, does this even need a test? Could it be that you think this origin strengthening pill is able to compare to that bottle of origin strengthening pills that was just auctioned out? However, even though he spoke in this way, Hu Jun still took out the origin strengthening pill and carefully examined it. Ma Qin concentrated his gaze on Hu Jun's expression and awaited a miracle to occur even though the chances were extremely slim. Before long, Ma Qin noticed that the enraged expression on Ma Qin's face completely froze. There's a chance. Ma Qin's eyes shone. The enraged expression on Hu Jun's face had vanished, and replacing it was an expression of excitement. Simply a work of art that overcomes that of nature, a work of art that overcomes that of nature. Perfect, too perfect. Ma Qin was shocked by Hu Jun. Lord Hu Jun, are you all right? It wasn't the first day that he'd known this grade 7 alchemist, but he could be sure that it was absolutely the first time that he had seen this grade 7 alchemist be so excited. Even when he appraised the bottle of 75% purity origin strengthening pills, this grade 7 alchemist wasn't so excited. Manager Qin, who placed this origin strengthening pill for auction? I want to meet him. Hu Jun instantly stood up from his seat and had completely lost his composure. Lord Hu Jun, you are. Ma Qin couldn't wrap his head around the matter. Could it be that this origin strengthening pill is a medicinal pill with a purity above 80%? Isn't this too unbelievable? Hu Jun took a deep breath, suppressed the excitement in his heart, and slowly asked, Manager Qin, do you know what the purity of this origin strengthening pill is? Could it be that it really has 80% or above in purity? Ma Qin's eyes opened wide like saucers and had a face full of astonishment. If it really was a medicinal pill with a purity of 80% or above, then their Ma clan auction house was really going to be in the limelight this time. Although rare, within the entire Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, there were some medicinal pills with a purity of 75%. But a medicinal pill with a purity of 80% or above. In the history of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, it seems to have never appeared before. 80%. Hu Jun was stunned when he heard what Ma Qin said. Who told you that the purity of this origin strengthening pill is at 80%? Could it be that it isn't at 80%? 79%. Ma Qin had a bewildered expression, and his excited mood had calmed down slightly. Like he thought, how could it be possible for a medicinal pill with a purity at 80% or above to appear? Hu Jun grunted coldly and said, with a clear voice, 79%. HMPH. The purity of this origin strengthening pill, if I didn't feel it wrongly, it's at least at 90% or above. As he finished speaking, a trace of excitement appeared on his face. To an alchemist, being able to see a medicinal pill with a purity at 90% or above was undoubtedly an extremely great honor. What he wanted to do now the most was meet the person that placed this medicinal pill for auction. If he could contact the alchemist that refined this origin strengthening pill and obtain guidance from that alchemist, his achievements in the Tao of alchemy would surely advance. Thus, Hu Jun was anxious in his heart and wished for nothing more than to directly meet the guest that placed this origin strengthening pill with a purity of 90% or above for auction. Manager Qin, hurry and take me to see that respected guest. Hu Jun's tone was extremely anxious, his chest rose and fell like bellows, and his eyes flickered with excitement. However, he quickly noticed that Ma Qin didn't react in the slightest, as if Ma Qin had completely not heard a word he said. 90% purity or above. Ma Qin was stunned, and his heart trembled. In the next moment, his entire body seemed as if he was held by the throat, and his face flushed red. Even though he wasn't an alchemist, he knew what a medicinal pill with a purity of 90% or above represented. Heavens! A medicinal pill like this is absolutely an existence of legend, and existence of myth. Now it had appeared within their Ma clan auction house. Manager Qin. With Hu Jun's cold shout, Ma Qin recovered from his shock. Lord Hu Jun, my apologies, I was enthralled earlier. Hurry and take me to see that respected guest. Hu Jun continued to repeat with an anxious tone. Within the room, Duan Lingtian was dozing off. He originally thought that an item that he would be interested in might appear during the Ma Clan auction house's auction, but up till now, 5 items had been auctioned and none were things that he was interested in. K.Er and Li Fei, however, looked on in interest. Shang Quan stood behind Duan Lingtian with a calm expression, not a bit concerned with everything in the outside world. Knock, knock. Right at this moment, the sound of door knocking echoed out, and the attendant's voice sounded. Guest, our manager wants to see you. Duan Lingtian returned to his senses and his eyebrows rose. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile, as he wasn't surprised. Although that origin strengthening pill was substandard in his eyes, its purity was still at 91%. Not to mention the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, even in the entire Darken Dynasty, or even the foreign lands, a medicinal pill with a purity of 91% was something that almost no alchemists could refine. This was something that only Rebirth Martial Emperor was capable of as a royal-grade alchemist. He'd long since guessed that so long as the Ma Clan's grade 7 alchemist were to identify the purity of that origin-strengthening pill, the alchemist would surely come look for him. Come in, Duan Lingtian said indifferently. Duan Lingtian once again saw Ma Qin, and he also saw an old man behind Ma Qin. Even though it was the first time he'd seen this old man, but Duan Lingtian still guessed his identity at the first possible moment. The old man ought to be the Ma Clan's grade 7 alchemist. Guessed. The gaze that Ma Qin used to look at Duan Lingtian now was filled with reverence. What a joke! A person that was capable of taking out an origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 90% or above, even if he thought with his ass, he would still be able to realize that the person wasn't simple. Behind the person was obviously an extremely formidable alchemist. No, terrifying wasn't enough to describe an alchemist that's capable of refining a medicinal pill with a purity at 90% or above. It wasn't too much to call the alchemist abnormal. Duan Lingtian glanced at Ma Qin indifferently and asked, "Is something the matter?" Ma Qin took a deep breath and introduced the old man by his side to Duan Lingtian. Guest, this is my Ma Clan's grade 7 alchemist, Lord Hu Jun. It's Lord Hu Jun that wants to meet you. Respected guest. Hu Jun looked at Duan Lingtian with an excited expression. May I ask, which respected alchemist refined this origin-strengthening pill that you placed for auction? Duan Lingtian shook his head when faced with Hu Jun's burning gaze. I don't know either. What? Hu Jun was stupefied, and Ma Qin was stupefied as well. Duan Lingtian continued, that origin-strengthening pill was gifted to me by an old man. However, that's a matter of a few months ago. I only have one last pill now, and the others have already been consumed by me. Hu Jun deeply glanced at Duan Lingtian when he heard what Duan Lingtian said, and when he noticed that there wasn't the slightest inkling on Duan Lingtian's face, he asked. Guest, do you know where that senior has gone? Duan Lingtian shook his head. I don't know, I only happened to meet him once. He said that I have a handsome appearance and I am pleasing to the eye, so he gave me some origin-strengthening pills. In the start, I still thought he was stingy, but later on I noticed that the origin-strengthening pills he gave me weren't simple. Alas, if I knew earlier that his origin-strengthening pills were so good, I would have asked for a few hundred more from him. As he finished speaking, Duan Lingtian had a face full of regret. A few hundred. Hu Jun and Ma Qin looked at each other, and they both had bitter smiles on their faces. This young man was really a newborn calf that wasn't afraid of a tiger. This is an origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 90% or above. Him being able to obtain a few was already an extremely great fortune. Duan Lingtian looked at Ma Qin and Hu Jun and asked like a fool, right, this origin-strengthening pill of mine ought to be able to sell for some money, right? Guest, don't worry, we will absolutely auction out a price that is beyond your imagination. However, guest, the rules of our Ma Clan auction house requires the deduction of a 10% administration fee, Ma Qin added. 10%? That's too much, right? Duan Lingtian frowned. Guest, our Ma Clan auction house's rules have always been like this. Do you still want to auction off this origin-strengthening pill? Ma Qin asked. If there's an administration fee deduction of 10%, then I'm not auctioning it. Duan Lingtian shook his head. Ma Qin was stupefied. Guest, do you want to consider for a moment? There's no need, I'm not auctioning it. Return it to me, Duan Lingtian said firmly. At the same time, he extended his hand and looked at Hu Jun, who held the origin-strengthening pill. Hu Jun took a deep breath and looked at Duan Lingtian. Guest, if you really give it to us to auction, we won't deduct the administration fee from it. Lord Hu Jun. Ma Qin was stupefied. Manager Qin, I'm confident that even if the patriarch was present, he would make this decision. You ought to be able to realize the extraordinary meaning this pill has to our Ma clan auction house. Hu Jun had a serious expression as he spoke. Ma Qin pondered for a moment, then he nodded. Okay, then we'll do it according to Lord Hu Jun. Guest, we won't deduct the administration fee from you. Are you willing to giving this origin strengthening pill to our Ma clan auction house to auction away? Since you aren't deducting the administration fee, then I'll naturally be willing to give it to you to auction, Duan Lingtian said, in all seriousness. Thank you, guest. Ma Qin and Hu Jun nodded to Duan Lingtian before leaving. After they found out that the origin strengthening pill with a purity of 90% or above was only an unexpected gain of Duan Lingtian's, they both lost interest in Duan Lingtian. The room's door closed once again. Li Fei, who was holding back her laughter all this time, couldn't stop herself from bursting out in laughter, and her face revealed a beautiful and brilliant smile. Scoundrel, when you were bluffing people earlier, it seemed so real. If it wasn't for me knowing the truth, I might have been cheated by you. Yes, young master, your act was really too convincing. Kei nodded in deep agreement, and her beautiful face was filled with adoration. What I'm curious of the most now is how much money that origin strengthening pill will actually sell for. Duan Lingtian's eyes narrowed and he lightly smiled. And right at this moment, the voice of the old man sounded out from the auction platform and caused Duan Lingtian's gaze to abruptly light up. Silver Fire Grass. 247 Chapter 248. Blaze Inscription. Silver Fire Grass. Duan Lingtian's gaze passed through the window in the room to descend onto the hand of the old man in the auction platform. The old man held an extremely special medical grass in his hand. Unlike an ordinary medicinal grass, this medicinal grass was completely silvery white in color and flickered with a light sheen. With a glance, one would know that it wasn't an ordinary medicinal grass. In the hall, a wave of sounds of surprise sounded out as expected. It's really the silver fire grass. I heard that when refining a medicine of grade 6 or below, so long this silver fire grass is placed into the cauldron, it will be able to increase the purity by 10%. This silver fire grass is a treasure to an alchemist. The old man on the auction platform lightly smiled. Guests, it looks like all of you are well acquainted with the silver fire grass. Exactly, the silver fire grass is indeed capable of increasing the purity of a grade 6 medicinal pill or below, and it can increase the purity by at least 10%. If one's luck is good, it's even capable of increasing the purity by nearly 15%. Increasing the purity of a grade 6 or below medicinal pill. In the room, disdain appeared on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth. As far as he was concerned, this was only the most ordinary and widespread use of the silver fire grass. It was difficult to fully express the worth of the silver fire grass. This silver fire grass, in his hands, could become an ever-successful weapon. Guests, the starting bid price for the silver fire grass is 100,000 silver. Now, interested guests may bid. The old man on the auction platform slowly said. 100,000 silver. At almost the exact moment the old man finished speaking, someone in the hall made a bid. 200,000 silver. 300,000 silver. In a short moment, the price of the silver fire grass rose steadily. Scoundrel, you're interested in this silver fire grass? Li Fei glanced at Duan Lingtian and blinked her beautiful eyes. She noticed that Duan Lingtian's gaze hadn't left the silver fire grass at all. I'm determined to get this silver fire grass. A trace of a smile appeared on the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth, and he nodded. Young master, could it be that you want to use this silver fire grass to refine medicinal pills? Kei looked at Duan Lingtian with a curious expression. Refine medicinal pills? Duan Lingtian shook his head. Kei, the purity of the medicinal pills I refine are all at 90% or above, so there isn't much difference if I add silver fire grass or not. I want to obtain this silver fire grass not to use it to refine a medicinal pills, but instead to use it to inscribe an inscription. The silver fire grass was the core material for a formidable offensive inscription that Duan Lingtian was able to inscribe currently. That type of offensive inscription was also one of the most formidable inscriptions that Duan Lingtian was able to inscribe currently, and it was extremely domineering. Kei came to a sudden understanding and nodded. Li Fei understood as well. Meanwhile, the bidding in the hall had slowed down. The current price of the silver fire grass was 900,000 silver. The person that placed this bid was a fatty in luxurious clothing in the hall, and seeing that no one was continuing to bid with him, the fatty crossed his legs and a trace of complacence appeared on his face. 1,000,000 silver. Right at this moment, a sonorous voice sounded out from a room on the second floor. Causing the smile on the fatty's face to freeze, he cursed as he said, "I don't want it anymore." Duan Lingtian's gaze focused, as he understood that the guests in the second floor rooms were about to make their moves. He wasn't in a hurry to bid. 1,100,000 silver. A voice sounded out from another room. In the end, these two people bid until the bid price of the silver fire grass rose to 1,700,000 silver. The guest in room number 7 has placed a bid of 1,700,000 silver. Are there any other guests that require it? The old man on the auction platform slowly said, 1,700,000 silver going once, 1,700,000 silver going twice. 2 million. Right at this moment, Duan Lingtian spoke out. He was precisely waiting for the last moment to make his move. For a moment, room number 7 went silent. The hall burst into an uproar. Insane. It's only a silver fire grass, actually bidding until 2 million silver. Exactly, the silver fire grass can at most increase the purity of a batch of grade 6 medicinal pills. 1,700,000 silver is already a sky-high price. We don't understand the world of the rich. Most of the people in the hall felt that the person who bid a price of 2 million silver was a sucker. The old man on the auction platform didn't expect that the silver fire grass could be bid to a high price of 2 million silver either, and his face was slightly flushed red. The guest in room number 1 has bid 2 million silver. Are there any other guests that want to bid a higher price? 2 million going once, 2 million going twice, 2 million going thrice. Deal. The silver fire grass belongs to the guest in room number 1. In the end, Duan Lingtian won the bid for the silver fire grass. Duan Lingtian's face revealed a smile. In a short moment, the sound of door knocking resounded, and an attendant respectfully said, "Guest, the silver fire grass you bid for has been sent over." "Bring it in," Duan Lingtian replied indifferently. The room door was opened, Duan Lingtian received the silver fire grass, and at the same time paid 2 million silver. A grass for 2 million silver, this was something unbelievable in the eyes of another, and it was difficult to understand for them. But as far as Duan Lingtian was concerned, this 2 million silver was worth spending. The silver fire grass was the core material for the blaze inscription. The blaze inscription was a formidable offensive inscription. Once utilized, a martial artist below the void prying stage would surely die without a doubt. It would be impossible for even a half-step void stage martial artist to escape with their lives. How domineering the blaze inscription was could be easily imagined. Unfortunately, one blaze inscription requires a complete silver fire grass as the core material. Duan Lingtian now wished for nothing more than to use one silver fire grass to inscribe many blaze inscriptions, but he knew that this was only his wishful thinking. If it wasn't inscribed with a complete silver fire grass, then the might of the blaze inscription would decline greatly. Even to the extent of even being inferior to the bone corrosion inscription. "I'm still too greedy." Duan Lingtian shook his head and sighed in his heart. Being able to obtain one silver fire grass and inscribe one blaze inscription could already be considered his good fortune. Li Fei noticed the excited expression on Duan Lingtian's face and asked curiously, "Scoundrel, what inscription can this silver fire grass inscribe?" Kaor looked at Duan Lingtian as well. Even Shang Quan, although his current expression didn't have any great change, his eyes revealed a sense of curiosity. After following the young master for some time, he'd grown from the shock at the beginning to the current numbness. The shocks that the young master brought him were too many. Now he wouldn't feel it to be strange if a miracle were to happen to the young master. The blaze inscription. Duan Lingtian's eyes squinted, then he spoke of the might of the blaze inscription. Able to annihilate any existence below the void prying stage. Li Fei and Kaor's delicate figures trembled, as they were both shocked. What a terrifying offensive inscription. Fright appeared on Shang Quan's face as well. Even though he was from a sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, a formidable offensive inscription that was able to annihilate any martial artist below the void prying stage was something he'd heard of but had never once seen. According to his knowledge, this type of inscription could only be inscribed by those heaven-defying inscription masters. He suddenly felt that even now, his understanding of the young master was still a drop in the ocean and was not worth mentioning. Being able to obtain the silver fire grass, my gains can be considered to be not bad. Duan Lingtian smiled in satisfaction, and his gaze once again descended onto the auction platform in the hall. What was currently being auctioned on the auction platform wasn't an item, it was a person, a robust man that was tied up in iron chains. On the robust man's face was a strange brand. Slave. Duan Lingtian's brows rose, as he recognized this brand. This brand was also present on Shang Quan's face. However, the brand on Shang Quan's face was currently covered by his mask, and others were unable to notice it. The robust man stood on the auction platform and swept the auction house's hall with a cold gaze, causing the faces of many to go pale. Third level of the nascent soul stage. Relying on his formidable spiritual force and the experience of rebirth martial emperor, Duan Lingtian could vaguely identify the cultivation level of this robust man. Meanwhile, the old man on the auction platform spoke. Everyone, the person beside me is a slave with a cultivation at the third level of the nascent soul stage. Everyone understands what slaves are, so I won't introduce him any further. The starting bid is 1 million silver. 1 million silver. Duan Lingtian watched the scene before him with a cold and indifferent gaze as if it didn't have any relation to him. Even after merging with the memories of rebirth martial emperor, Duan Lingtian wasn't rebirth martial emperor after all, so he had his own thoughts. Now, looking at the slave before him being bid on by others, his heart slowly went cold. In this world where the strong were respected, a human's life was lowly like grass and could be measured with money. Only by becoming a true expert could he be able to protect himself and protect everyone beside him. He knew that if he wanted to become a true expert, the road he had to take was still far. 5 million silver, 6 million silver, the price of the third-level nascent soul stage slave rose steadily. In the end, he was bought by someone for the high price of 8 million silver. Subsequently, another few slaves were auctioned. The strengths of the slaves that were auctioned later on increased. The strongest was actually in existence at the 6th level of the nascent soul stage, and he was bought by someone for the high price of 80 million silver. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be astounded. These people spend so much money to buy these slaves, could it be that they aren't afraid that these slaves would betray them? It was slightly difficult for Li Fei to understand. As far as she was concerned, easily spending a few million silver or even a few tens of millions of silver to buy a slave that might betray you was too dangerous. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. Little Fei, people who dare bid for these slaves ordinarily wouldn't lack powerhouses by their side. So they aren't afraid of these slaves betraying them. Since these people have been reduced to becoming slaves, it shows that they're afraid of death. For the sake of living, they wouldn't dare act rashly. Li Fei nodded and then was absorbed in thought. The following item wasn't a slave anymore. A young girl held a tray that was covered in red cloth as she walked up the auction platform. Whoosh, whoosh, and almost at that exact moment, the two little pythons that were inside Duan Lingtian's sleeve flashed out and descended before the window. Hiss hiss, little black and little white flicked their tongues, and their sharp eyes stared fixedly at the tray that was covered by the red cloth, as if they'd noticed something. 248 Chapter 249, Mysterious Little Gold Mouse. Needless to say, the actions of the two little pythons startled Duan Lingtian as well. Could it be that little black and little white noticed something that can be eaten? Li Fei's voice abruptly sounded and was filled with surprise. Probably. Duan Lingtian approved of what Li Fei said, as these two little pythons were basically gluttons. However, he was slightly curious about what exactly would cause these two little fellows to be so excited. Hiss hiss, the two little pythons seemed to be able to understand Duan Lingtian and Li Fei's conversation, and they turned their heads and fiercely flicked their tongues as if they were announcing their dissatisfaction. Young master, big sister Fei, don't talk about little black and little white anymore. Look, they're both angry. Kair lightly stroked the small heads of the two little pythons, and the two little fellows meekly rubbed Kair, then they turned their heads to continue staring fixedly at the tray that was covered in red cloth. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled, his gaze then returned to the auction platform. And right at this moment, the old man on the auction platform lifted off the red cloth. It could be vaguely seen that within a special little cage was a fierce beast with a dejected aura. This fierce beast was only a little mouse, and unlike an ordinary mouse that would cause one to feel disgust, this mouse had an entire body of golden fur that was extremely fluffy, extremely similar to a plush toy from Duan Lingtian's previous life on Earth. Presently, this little mouse lay there in a drowsy state. Drugged. Duan Lingtian frowned. He was able to discern with a glance that this gold little mouse had been given medicine similar to the origin-sealing parasite. The origin-sealing parasite, the poison that Shang Quan was infected with before, which was able to suppress origin energy. So cute. Li Fei and Kair's beautiful eyes lit up when they saw this gold little mouse, and traces of a maternal luster appeared within their eyes. Hiss hiss, after the two little pythons saw the little gold mouse, they were extremely agitated, and if it wasn't for Duan Lingtian being there watching them, it was very likely that they'd already directly shattered the window and rushed down. Little black, little white. You two wouldn't be thinking of eating it, right? Duan Lingtian looked at the two little fellows with a strange gaze. Little black, little white, you two must be obedient, you can't eat it. Li Fei and Kair hurriedly looked at the two little fellows and spoke at almost the exact same time. Instantly, the two little fellows drooped their heads, and flowing lights revolved within their eyes. Obviously, they were slightly unhappy. You two really intended to eat it? Duan Lingtian was slightly speechless. However, if the poison in its body is removed, I'm afraid it will be impossible you two little fellows to eat it. Duan Lingtian's gaze once again descended onto the little gold mouse. He was able to discern that at its prime, this little gold mouse would probably be not one bit inferior to the two little pythons. Even to the extent that it was even stronger. Young master, you're saying that that little gold mouse is even stronger than little black and little white? Kair couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice, as she knew the strength of the two little pythons. That cute little gold mouse that looked harmless was stronger than them. Li Fei was stupefied and had a face full of disbelief. Scoundrel, did you make a mistake? Hiss hiss, the two little pythons seemed to understand what Duan Lingtian said, and they once again glared at Duan Lingtian. When they saw Duan Lingtian return a glare at them, they instantly waned and drooped their heads in dejection. You two little fellows don't be unconvinced. Duan Lingtian smiled. Young master, can you buy it? Kair looked at the little gold mouse, and her pair of beautiful eyes flickered with a maternal luster. Yeah, scoundrel, this little gold mouse is too cute, Li Fei said as well. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled. Since you both like it, then I'll buy it. If I'm not wrong, this little gold mouse is very likely a gold for mouse. Gold for mouse? Kair didn't have a big reaction, however, Li Fei was slightly moved. Gold for mouse? The mouse that's known as the strongest king of fierce beasts below a demon beasts. The strongest mouse-type fierce beast? Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded. According to its characteristics, there's a 90% and above chance it's a gold for mouse. As for if it actually is one, it would have to wait until I buy it and examine it closely. The old man on the auction platform had now already started introducing the little gold mouse. Everyone, this auction item now is one of the last 3 auction items of our auction today. I presume some guests have already discerned it. You're right, this is a gold for mouse, moreover, it's an infant mouse. Normally speaking, a gold for mouse infant would at most have a strength at the nascent soul stage. But this infant mouse has a strength at the 7th level of the nascent soul stage. The hall went into a complete uproar as soon as the old man finished speaking. Infant gold for mouse, 7th level of the nascent soul stage. In this way, when this infant mouse matures, it will be very likely to transform into an existence at the half-step void stage. Not only the half-step void stage. A gold for mouse that has a strength at the 7th level of the nascent soul stage during infancy can be considered to be special amongst gold for mouses, and its natural talent would be outstanding. Even to the extent it might possibly transform into a demon beast. Demon beast? That's an existence at the void stage and above. Everyone was excited. Buying this infant gold for mouse was comparable to buying an existence that had the potential to transform into a demon beast. A demon beast was comparable to a void stage powerhouse. Humph, don't get happy too early, the gold for mouse is famous for being fierce. Do all of you think you're able to control it? Right at this moment, a voice of ridicule sounded out from the corner of the hall. Instantly, the clamor in the hall quieted down. Yeah, a king of fierce beasts like the gold for mouse wouldn't willingly become a human's vassal. If you don't have formidable strength, then don't hope to control the gold for mouse. Everyone, this gold for mouse has been drugged with the origin sealing liquid, so only the strength at the 9th level of the body tempering stage remains. Once it's bought by a guest, our Ma clan auction house will send it out with the antidote, the old man said slowly. Young master, what's the origin sealing liquid? In the room, Kair had a face full of curiosity as she asked Duan Lingtian. Origin sealing liquid is a type of toxic poison that suppresses the origin energy, However, it can only suppress the origin energy of fierce beasts and martial artists below the void-crying stage, Duan Lingtian explained. The origin sealing liquid could be considered the lower version of the origin sealing parasite. And it was far less domineering than the origin sealing parasite. If it was the origin sealing parasite, so long as it wasn't an existence at the void initiation stage or above, they would practically all be infected. Just like Shang Quan, at that time he was precisely infected with the poison of the origin sealing parasite. Kei came to a sudden understanding when she heard what Duan Lingtian said. I really never would have imagined that this infant goldfur mouse was stronger than little black and little white. Li Fei said in surprise. What she said also caused the two little pythons to become restless, and their two little eyes were filled with refusal to accept it. You two little fellows are still unwilling to accept it. Duan Lingtian extended his hand and flicked the small heads of the two little pythons, then his gaze once again descended onto the infant goldfur mouse, and he frowned. Logically speaking, before an infant goldfur mouse matures, it would at most be at the 9th level of the origin core stage. Looks like this little gold mouse isn't so simple. Earlier, Duan Lingtian didn't notice that this little gold mouse was an infant mouse. When he heard the old man's words, he came to a sudden understanding and realized the mysteriousness of this little gold mouse and that it wasn't simple. Meanwhile, the bidding for the infant goldfur mouse had started. 1 million gold. A sonorous voice sounded out from a room on the 2nd floor, directly suppressing all the voices of bids from before. Instantly, the hall was deathly silent. 1 million gold was equivalent to 100 million silver. Practically no one within the hall was able to produce so much money. Room number 7 again. Duan Lingtian was slightly surprised. He had used 2 million silver to suppress the bid of 1,700,000 silver from room number 7 to obtain the silver fire grass earlier. 1,500,000 gold. A voice sounded from another room. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth twitched. These people were really wealthy. Eventually, after room number 7 bid 3 million gold, the bidding of the infant goldfur mouse temporarily quieted down. 3 million gold, that's 300 million silver. Who the heck is in room number 7? So wealthy. Only the Ma clan auction house knows the identities of the people within the rooms on the 2nd floor, and when they leave, it's all through special passages. Maybe it's someone from Black Wind City's 3 great clans, or maybe it's someone from those large merchant groups. The people in the hall were now only considered spectators, and they were shocked by such sky-high prices. 3 million gold. To them, this was a wealth that was difficult for them to obtain. The guest in room number 7 has bid 3 million gold. Are there other guests who want to continue bidding? On the auction platform, the old man was slightly excited. 3 million gold once, 3 million gold twice, 3,010,000 gold. Under Li Fei and Kei's gazes of anticipation, Duan Lingtian bid in an unhurried manner. Duan Lingtian's voice sounding out caused the entire hall to go silent. After a moment, the hall went into an uproar. Others all add a few hundreds of thousands a time. Isn't this guest from room number 1 too stingy? Exactly, actually only adding 10,000 gold. Many people started discussing. Duan Lingtian regarded these discussions as beneath his notice when he heard them. 10,000 gold, it's easy to talk. That's gold, not silver. 10,000 gold is equivalent to 1 million silver, and that is equivalent to a Fergana horse. Is this still considered a small amount? The sonorous voice from room number 7 sounded out once again. 3,500,000 gold. The crowd in the hall instantly gasped in admiration. This is what's called domineering, directly adding 490,000 gold. Exactly, compared to the guest in room number 7, that guest in room number 1 is too stingy. I wonder if the guest in room number 1 will continue to bid. Accompanied by the burst of discussion in the hall, Duan Lingtian finally opened his mouth lazily. 3,510,000 gold. 249 Chapter 250, Jade-Eyed Heavenly Mouse. After Duan Lingtian once again voiced out his bid. Silence. The hall was deathly silent. No one would have imagined that not only would the guest in room number 1 follow the bid, the guest had once again added 10,000 gold. HMPH. The sonorous voice once again sounded out from room number 7, and it was mixed within was a sense of fury. 3,800,000 gold. 3,810,000 gold. Duan Lingtian said unhurriedly. This time, the people in the hall were speechless. However, room number 7 had gone silent and didn't continue bidding. Obviously, 3,800,000 gold was the price the person in room number 7 had set in his heart. The old man on the auction platform raised his voice. The guest in room number 1 has bid 3,810,000 gold. Are there any guests who want to continue bidding? 3,810,000 gold going once, 3,810,000 gold going twice, 3,810,000 gold going thrice. Deal. Yeah. In room number 1, Li Fei and Kair had faces full of excitement. Li Fei even bravely came close to Duan Lingtian and gave Duan Lingtian a kiss. Although Duan Lingtian's face had a smile, he was bleeding in his heart. The Emperor of the Crimson Sky Kingdom had bestowed 10 million gold to him, and in this short amount of time, he had used up a little less than half of it. This amount was almost a quarter of all the wealth in his possession. Guest. In next to no time, the attendant's voice sounded. Subsequently, Duan Lingtian saw the Ma clan auction house's manager, Ma Qin, personally sending the antidote and the cage with the little gold mouse to them. Ma Qin had a complicated gaze. He never would have imagined that this young man had such a large wealth. That was nearly 4 million gold. After Ma Qin put down the little gold mouse and the antidote, Duan Lingtian withdrew 3,810,000 gold from his spatial ring and passed it to Ma Qin. Thank you, guest. Ma Qin deeply glanced at Duan Lingtian and then turned around and left. After the room's door was closed, Duan Lingtian opened the cage and carried the little gold mouse out. Squeak, squeak. The little gold mouse's pair of jade green eyes flickered with a fierce light. It wanted to explode out and attack Duan Lingtian. However, its current strength at the 9th level of the body tempering stage was nothing in Duan Lingtian's eyes, and Duan Lingtian easily caught it. He then smiled and said, "Little fellow, be obedient. Otherwise, I'll let them eat you." Duan Lingtian put the little gold mouse on the table, then he glanced at the two little pythons. Whoosh, whoosh. The two little pythons flashed out and descended beside the little gold mouse. Their eyes stared fixedly at the little gold mouse as if they had encountered a natural enemy, and they ceaselessly flicked their tongues. Hiss hiss. Squeak squeak. The little gold mouse wasn't at a disadvantage at all when facing the two little pythons, and it glared with its jade green eyes to cross eyes with the two little pythons. Jade green eyes. Duan Lingtian suddenly realized that this little gold mouse was indeed not a goldfur mouse. The eyes of a goldfur mouse were all crimson red in color, and that was one of the characteristics of a goldfur mouse. Through the memories of the rebirth martial emperor, Duan Lingtian was extremely sure of this. Maybe even the members of the Ma clan auction house had made a mistake. Green eyes, gold fur. Duan Lingtian searched the memories of rebirth martial emperor, and he entirely sunk into a state of absent-mindedness. After a short moment, he finally noticed that the little gold mouse was exactly the same as a type of mouse that the rebirth martial emperor knew of. That type of mouse is a demon beast. Moreover, it was a formidable demon beast that possessed the blood of a demon emperor. In Cloud Continent, among the ones who stood at the peak, besides the human martial emperors, there were also the demon beasts' demon emperors. The strength of a demon emperor wasn't inferior to a human martial emperor, even to the extent that they were even stronger than humans in some aspects. Jade-eyed heavenly mouse. Duan Lingtian finally confirmed it. The little gold mouse before him that seemed to be similar to a goldfur mouse was a jade-eyed heavenly mouse that had the natural talent to become a demon emperor. A demon beast that stood at the peak of Cloud Continent. Who? Duan Lingtian extended his hand and grabbed the little gold mouse, then he carefully sized up the halos within its eyes. In the end, he confirmed it. It hadn't been 5 years since this little gold mouse was born, and it was around 1 year older than Little Black and Little White. Duan Lingtian's mood couldn't help but surge. Jade-eyed heavenly mouse. That's an existence of legend. Even Rebirth Martial Emperor had only heard of the existence of jade-eyed heavenly mice and had never seen one. So long as the jade-eyed heavenly mouse doesn't come to a premature end on the road to maturity, relying on its formidable bloodline, becoming a demon emperor was only a matter of time. Now Duan Lingtian felt that coming to the Ma clan auction house was the right decision. This trip was worthwhile. Not only did he bid on and obtain a silver fire grass, now he had even obtained a jade-eyed heavenly mouse. Young master, don't grab it like that, it will feel pain. Her heart ached as she seized the little gold mouse from Duan Lingtian, then she lightly stroked the little gold mouse's fluffy fur and consoled it. It doesn't hurt, it doesn't hurt. Duan Lingtian noticed that the little gold mouse's pair of green eyes that fiercely glared at him returned to a gaze of warmth when it looked at K'er, and it now even rubbed K'er's hand extremely meekly. So cute. Li Fei extended her hand to stroke the little gold mouse as well, and the little gold mouse closed its eyes with an expression of enjoyment. Hiss hiss, the two little pythons that were nearby had eyes that had a sense of envy when they saw this scene. This little gold mouse wouldn't be a male, right? Duan Lingtian extended his hand. He was full of curiosity as he flipped over the lower half of the little gold mouse and took a look. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse cried out and angrily glared at Duan Lingtian. So it's a little female mouse. Duan Lingtian smiled, then he extended his hand and grabbed the two little pythons. Little black, little white. If you two are obedient in the future, I'll give you two more good food, and your strengths will surpass it sooner or later. At that time, you two can bully it to your heart's content. Hiss hiss, the two little pythons rubbed Duan Lingtian when they heard what he said. They were slightly excited. Scoundrel, you're leading little black and little white astray. Li Fei couldn't stop herself from rolling her eyes at Duan Lingtian when she saw this scene. Kaor looked at the antidote on the table and asked, Young master, can I give this antidote directly to Little Gold to eat? Little Gold? Duan Lingtian was startled. It had only been a moment, but Kaor had already given the little gold mouse a name. He nodded. Okay, directly give the antidote to it. However, if you give the antidote to it now, it wouldn't hurt you, right? As he finished speaking, Duan Lingtian looked at the little gold mouse with a face full of vigilance. The little gold mouse was a jade-eyed heavenly mouse after all, a king amongst demon beasts. If it were to throw a tantrum, it wouldn't be a joke. At that time, even with Shang Quan's strength, he might not be able to rescue them in time. Kaor touched the little gold mouse, and her beautiful eyes were like water as she lightly asked, Don't worry, young master, Little Gold won't attack us. Right, Little Gold. The little gold mouse nodded its small head like a human when it heard what Kaor said, and at the same time, it glanced at Duan Lingtian complacently, causing Duan Lingtian to be happy. In next to no time, Kaor fed the antidote to the little gold mouse. After consuming the antidote, the dejected aura on the little gold mouse vanished, and replacing it was a vigorous aura. It was as if the mouse was given a stimulant. Hiss hiss, the two little pythons that were held by Duan Lingtian glared at the little gold mouse, and their pair of gold and silver eyes were filled with vigilance. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse bared its fangs and brandished its claws at the two little pythons, and a formidable aura arose from its body. Instantly, in the space above the little gold mouse, 1,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. As if it was telling that its small body contained formidable strength. Duan Lingtian's face sank when he saw this scene. Shang Quan. Shang Quan took a step forward when he heard Duan Lingtian, and the formidable aura of a void-prying stage powerhouse swept out to envelop the little gold mouse and pressed down upon it. Squeak squeak, instantly, the 1,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes above the little gold mouse vanished and it suddenly waned. It buried its small head in Kaor's hand, and its body was even shivering. Young master, how could you ask Shang Quan to scare it? Kaor looked at Duan Lingtian and pouted, then she extended her hand to stroke the little gold mouse's fluffy fur and comforted it. Little Gold, it's all right now, it's all right now. Exactly, scoundrel, it's only just a child, Li Fei said as well, then she went to comfort the little gold mouse with Kaor. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled bitterly, as he knew that the maternal instinct of the two girls had flowed out again. However, as far as he was concerned, the deed earlier was a must. He at least needed to let this jade-eyed heavenly mouse infant know who the master was and that it mustn't be presumptuous in front of the master. Hiss hiss, the two little pythons both jumped for joy when they saw the little gold mouse being forced to surrender. They coiled around Duan Lingtian's arm as they danced about, and their small heads ceaselessly rubbed Duan Lingtian intimately. Little black, little white. Luckily, I still have you too, otherwise, I would really not have any place in this family. Duan Lingtian pretended to sigh, then he looked at the two little pythons with an expression that said, I can only stick together and depend on you two in the future. His tone vaguely had a trace of jealousy mixed within. Young master, what are you saying? Scoundrel. Kaor and Li Fei rolled their eyes at Duan Lingtian when they heard what he said, as they never expected Duan Lingtian to be jealous of the little gold mouse. The little gold mouse became obedient after being intimidated by Shang Quan, and even when Duan Lingtian occasionally extended his finger to knock its small head, it would be forced to keep its anger to itself. However, towards the two girls, the little gold mouse had a heartfelt intimacy to them. It was as if it had taken the two girls as its mothers. Based on Duan Ling Tian's evaluations, even if he tried to drive this jade-eyed heavenly mouse infant away now, it would probably be unwilling to leave. This was something he'd never imagined earlier. 1 million gold. Right at this moment, a voice entered Duan Ling Tian's ears, and Duan Ling Tian once again looked at the auction hall. In next to no time, he found out what the current auction item was from the discussions in the hall. It was an offensive inscription. Light Edge inscription. The Light Edge inscription was a type of inscription that was capable of annihilating nascent soul martial artists, and if one attacked unexpectedly, even a 9th-level nascent soul martial artist might be killed. This Light Edge inscriptions was far inferior in strength compared to the bone corrosion inscription that Duan Ling Tian refined. However, in the outside, it was still an extremely precious existence. 250 Chapter 251, Final Auction Item. In the end, this Light Edge inscription was obtained by the person in room number 7 for 1,600,000 gold. The sounds of surprise rose and fell within the hall. The guest in room number 1 actually didn't make a move. Yeah, truly strange. The Light Edge inscription is a great item. Even though it's a disposable item, compared to the gold for mouse, it's much more practical. Duan Ling Tian couldn't help but snicker when he heard the discussions of these people. Light Edge inscription, not to mention he paid no regard to such an inscription, even if he wanted one, he could refine it himself. Moreover, the cost would at most be 3 million silver, or 30,000 gold. As far as he was concerned, that person in room number 7 was simply a sucker for spending 1,600,000 gold to buy this Light Edge inscription. I never would have imagined that the art of inscription has declined to such a state, a mere Light Edge inscription is able to be sold at such a high price. Duan Ling Tian sighed rather emotionally. And he couldn't help but think in his heart. When the time comes that he's so poor that he's unable to keep the pot boiling, he can also sell some inscriptions, and it would absolutely be an extremely profitable transaction. In next to no time, the voice of the old man on the auction platform sounded again, and his voice was slightly excited. Everyone, the next thing to be auctioned is the last auction item for today's auction. According to Arma Clan Auction House's original plan, the Light Edge inscription should have been the final auction item. And the current final auction item is something a guest entrusted to our auction house to auction out at the last minute. As the old man finished speaking, his face was slightly flushed red. This scene also caused all the people in the hall to become curious. What exactly was it that caused the old man to be so excited? Old man Ma, stop beating around the bush, hurry up and say what item it is. Exactly, it's already the final auction item, hurry up and finish the auction. The entire auction hall was clamorous for a moment. Everyone was filled with interest towards the auction item that the Ma Clan auction house placed at the end. They were clear in their hearts that according to the Ma Clan auction house's usual practice, this final auction item's worth would absolutely not be inferior to the gold for mouse and Light Edge inscription. In room number 1, scoundrel, I never expected the Ma Clan auction house to place your origin strengthening pill as the final auction item. Li Fei looked at Duan Ling Tian, and her beautiful eyes were filled with curiosity. I wonder how much the final bid price for the origin strengthening pill with 90% or above purity that you refined will be. Duan Ling Tian had a face full of anticipation as well. We'll soon know how much it can be auctioned for. In next to no time, under the gazes of everyone present, the old man on the auction platform lifted up the red cloth from the tray in the young girl's hand. A pill bottle appeared before everyone's eyes. A medicinal pill again. Instantly, the hall exploded out in an uproar. Could it be a void advancement pill? Possibly. Only a void advancement pill has the worth to be placed as the final auction item. If it's a void advancement pill, its price would easily surpass the earlier gold for mouse. After all, this is a medicinal pill that would allow a half-step void stage martial artist to directly break through to the void prying stage. For a time, many people guessed that it was a void advancement pill that was within the pill bottle the old man held in his hand. As far as they were concerned, only a void advancement pill had the qualification to become the final auction item. Void advancement pill. Now even Duan Ling Tian had no choice but to admire the imagination of the crowd of people in the hall. The old man raised his hand to make the people in the hall quiet down. Everyone, it isn't a void advancement pill that's in my hand. Not a void advancement pill. For a moment, the people in the hall were all stupefied. Not a void advancement pill. Then what medicinal pill was it? Under the gazes of everyone present, the old man slowly spoke. The pill bottle in my hand has one origin strengthening pill within it. Origin strengthening pill. For a moment, all the people in the hall were dumbstruck. Origin strengthening pill again, and only one. However, this time, no one made a fuss about it again. After all, with the 10 origin strengthening pills with 75% purity earlier, they were mentally prepared. Everyone surely thinks it's weird. Why would our Ma clan auction house make an origin strengthening pill as the final auction item? Speaking up to this point, the old man stopped for a moment, sufficiently holding them in suspense. This old man is quite professional in directing an auction. In room number 1, Duan Lingtian looked at the old man through the window and shook his head with a smile. Li Fei and K'er couldn't help but nod in deep agreement. If it wasn't for them knowing what the old man would say next, they might have been held in suspense by the old man as well. Finally, the old man spoke with a voice that had a trace of excitement mixed within. Everyone, I can guarantee to all of you, the value of this origin strengthening pill is absolutely not inferior to a void advancement pill. Hurry up and be straightforward. I even thought you were going to say it earlier, but who knew you were holding us in suspense again? The old man's actions had obviously caused public rage. The old man laughed embarrassedly, then he took a deep breath and his face went serious as he solemnly said, "Guests, what I said earlier wasn't nonsense. This origin strengthening pill in my hand, not to mention you wouldn't be able to find a second in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, even throughout the entire Darken Dynasty, you might not be able to find a second. Because, after the testing and verification of Lord Hujun, the purity of this origin strengthening pill has attained an unprecedented 91%. As the old man finished speaking, he himself got excited. Bang! A tossed stone raised 1,000 ripples. Instantly, the entire hall was stirred, and at least half the people shuddered and instinctively stood up from their seats. An origin strengthening pill with a purity of 91%. How could this be possible? Even a medicinal pill with a purity at 80% or above is an existence of legend. This origin strengthening pill with a purity of 91% is practically impossible to exist. If it's real, the value of the origin strengthening pill is indeed something that the void advancement pill can't compare to. Of course, even though void advancement pills are valuable, they frequently appear in the auctions of the various large auction houses of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Imperial City. But this origin strengthening pill, not to mention its purity is above 90%, even if its purity was above 80%, something like that has never appeared before in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's history. This origin strengthening pill has an extraordinary significance. After a burst of excitement, the group of people that stood up sat back down. Can you let me take a look at this origin strengthening pill? Right at this moment, an aged voice sounded out from a room on the second floor. Subsequently, under the gazes of everyone present, a person directly jumped out of the window and descended onto the auction platform. This was an old man in green clothes. The old man's gaze was brimming with vigor, and he had an extraordinary bearing as he stood there. Grade 7 Alchemist. Duan Lingtian's eyes were sharp, and he noticed the Alchemist Guild badge on the old man's chest at the first possible moment. This badge precisely belonged to a Grade 7 Alchemist. Grade 7 Alchemist. In next to no time, many other people identified the old man's identity and exclaimed in low voices. The green-clothed old man looked at the old man that directed the auction and slowly said, "I'm the alchemist that has just been sent to Blackwind City by the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Alchemist Guild's main guild. In another few days, I'll complete the takeover from the acting guild master of the Blackwind City's Alchemist Guild and become the new guild master." As soon as the green-clothed old man finished speaking, the hall went into an uproar again. So it turned out that this green-clothed old man was a member of the Alchemist Guild. Moreover, it's the new guild master for Blackwind City's Alchemist Guild. After all, since 3 years ago, after the Blackwind City's Alchemist Guild's guild master, a grade 7 alchemist, died from an accident, the guild master position of Blackwind City's Alchemist Guild was assumed by a senior grade 8 alchemist. No one had imagined that after 3 years, the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Alchemist Guild's main guild would send someone over. So it's the guild master. The old man who directed the auction respectfully bowed to the green-clothed old man, then he passed the pill bottle in his hand over. He wasn't worried that the green-clothed old man would forcefully seize this origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91%. On the day their Ma clan auction house held an auction, there would be 3 half-step void stage powerhouses guarding the auction. Unless you had a void-prying stage powerhouse backing you up, don't think about having any ideas in their auction house. The green-clothed old man poured out the origin-strengthening pill, then he carefully examined it. Before long, his figure lightly trembled, and he said in disbelief, "Really? It's really an origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91%. The green-clothed old man took a deep breath before returning the origin-strengthening pill to the old man that directed the auction, and he said, with an anxious tone, "Can you tell where the person who placed this origin-strengthening pill for auction is?" "Guild Master, I'm sorry, our Ma clan auction house maintains complete secrecy towards the identity of every guest in the rooms." The old man who directed the auction shook his head. The green-clothed old man nodded, then he once again flew back into his room. And at the same time, his voice sounded out once again. "I'm determined to obtain this origin-strengthening pill. I hope that everyone can give me some face." However, no one paid any attention to him. But along with the appearance of the green-clothed old man, practically everyone present was able to confirm that the origin-strengthening pill of 91% purity that was being auctioned now was real. On the auction platform, the old man continued, "I presume that everyone is clear in their hearts about what an origin-strengthening pill of 91% purity represents. If an alchemist used this as a blueprint to conduct research, he might be able to pry into the profound secrets of its high purity and obtain a great benefit from it. Moreover, even if you buy such a medicinal pill as a valuable collectible, it's still a unique item. If you offer it to those large sects, or even the imperial family, you'll even have the opportunity to obtain benefits that are hard to imagine. I won't talk any more nonsense. The starting bid for this origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91% is 1 million gold." In the end, the old man spoke in a clear voice and started the bid. And right at this moment, the entire hall was deathly silent. Even the rooms on the second floor had all gone silent without any movement. In room number 1, Li Fei was stupefied as she looked at Duan Lingtian. "Scoundrel, is this Ma clan auction house intentionally not wanting you to sell off this origin-strengthening pill? Is he mad? 1 million gold, for only a mere origin-strengthening pill, how would anyone possibly?" Li Fei never finished what she was saying, because her beautiful pupils couldn't help but constrict. Because a voice had interrupted her. 5 million gold. 251 Chapter 252, Collusion. 5 million gold, an aged voice sounded out, and it broke the peace in the auction hall. Li Fei's expression froze for a second, and she had a face full of disbelief. K'er was stupefied as well, and she had a burning gaze that was filled with adoration when she looked at Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian was startled as well. He was able to discern that the owner of this was precisely the green-clothed old man from before, the grade 7 alchemist that was soon to become Blackwind City's Alchemist Guild's guild master. 5 million gold, this price had already completely surpassed the infant jade-eyed heavenly mouse. The first thought in Duan Lingtian's heart was, "I've earned back the money I spent on the jade-eyed heavenly mouse." The second thought was, "I can be considered to have experienced the meaning of, items are precious when they are rare." As expected, the old man's bid caused a stir in the auction hall. That guild master directly bid 5 million gold. Even though he's a grade 7 alchemist, he ought to not have that much money, right? HMPH. Didn't you hear of his identity earlier? An origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91% has an extraordinary significance to the Alchemist Guild as well. He's surely thinking of using the wealth of the Alchemist Guild to bid for this origin-strengthening pill. Everyone present was shocked by the green-clothed old man's massive bid. I wonder if anyone will continue to bid. Many people couldn't help but think this in their hearts. Finally, 6 million gold, that sonorous voice from room number 7 echoed out once again. Room number 7 again, who the heck is in room number 7? Too terrifying, casually bidding 6 million gold like that. The voice from room number 7 once again caused a stir in the hall. 7 million gold. Right at this moment, the voice of the green-clothed old man sounded out again, and at the same time, he said, with a deep voice, "Sir, I hope you can give out Alchemist Guild some face." "Humph, let's rely on our own ability." The sonorous voice sounded out once again from room number 7, not giving a shred of face to the green-clothed old man. 8 million gold. The room that the green-clothed old man resided in went quiet, and he didn't bid any more. Seemingly, the price had already passed the value of the pill in his heart. The guest in room number 7 has bid a price of 8 million gold now. Are there any other guests who want to continue bidding? 8 million gold going once. 8 million gold going twice. The voice of the old man on the auction platform was excited as he spoke. The guest in room number 1 has given up again. Seems to be so. He doesn't want such a good item. Voices of surprise echoed out within the hall, one after the other. 8 million gold going thrice. Deal. Along with the old man's voice sounding out, the origin strengthening pill with a purity of 91% had become the property of the person in room number 7. In room number 1, Duan Lingtian started laughing. An origin strengthening pill that cost 1,000 or so silver was actually sold for 8 million gold, and in silver it would be 800 million silver. Even if he deducted the cost of the jade-eyed heavenly mouse and silver fire grass from before, he'd still earned over 4 million gold. Unbelievable, unbelievable, Li Fei felt as if she was dreaming. Young master, they're still wondering why you didn't fight for it with the person from room number 7. Kaor looked at Duan Lingtian and playfully stuck out her tongue. Fight for it? Duan Lingtian laughed. That was an item he placed on auction. In next to no time, the attendant knocked the door again. The Ma Clan auction house's manager, Ma Qin, appeared once again, and he passed the 8 million gold to Duan Lingtian. Congratulations, guest. Ma Qin's heart was bleeding. The 10% administration fee. Gone, just like that. 8 million gold, even if it was only a 10% administration fee, it would still be 800,000 gold, which was equivalent to 80 million silver. Duan Lingtian looked at Ma Qin and asked, how do we leave? Guest, we have provided a special passage for every guest in the rooms. You, lead the guests out. Ma Qin looked at the attendant and instructed. Yes. The attendant hurriedly nodded, then he led Duan Lingtian's group of 4 out of the room and turned into the special passage that was at the side of the room. As for Ma Qin, his eyes flashed, then he gritted his teeth, seeming to have made a difficult decision. In next to no time, Ma Qin left room number 1 and walked into room number 7. In room number 7, a dignified middle-aged man sat there, and behind the middle-aged man, another 2 old men followed. The dignified middle-aged man's sonorous voice sounded out when he saw Ma Qin come in. Manager Ma, have you considered it? I only want that gold for mouse. The other things are yours. That person is able to pay nearly 4 million gold in one go, so he is obviously someone that doesn't lack money. The corners of Ma Qin's mouth twitched when he heard this. That violet-clothed young man naturally doesn't lack money. Not to mention the wealth in his possession, even just the money that the origin strengthening pill with a purity of 91% sold for was already 8 million gold. As far as he was concerned, the wealth of that violet-clothed young man would absolutely surpass 10 million gold. Noticing Ma Qin being slightly hesitant, the dignified middle-aged man continued. If Manager Ma doesn't feel at ease, you may follow behind us. Once we kill them, Manager Ma can directly appear, and you won't have to do anything to obtain all the wealth of that person. Manager Ma, when you let an opportunity slip by, it may never come back. What we want you to provide is only where he went. The dignified middle-aged man glanced deeply at Ma Qin. I hope Manager Ma can quickly come to a decision, otherwise, once they've left, it will be too late. Needless to say, every sentence that the dignified middle-aged man uttered smashed against Ma Qin's restless heart that wanted to agree. Outside the Ma Clan auction house, Duan Lingtian's group of 4 walked out in large strides, then he looked at their surroundings and noticed that before them was a remote alley that was devoid of people. This Ma Clan auction house is rather thoughtful. Leaving from this passage will allow us to completely avoid the coveting of others. Li Fei looked at the surroundings and evaluated. Duan Lingtian nodded then walked out in large strides. Let's first find an inn to stay at. We'll leave Blackwind City tomorrow morning at dawn. However, he'd only takes a few steps when Duan Lingtian became vigilant and stopped his footsteps. Meanwhile, Shang Quan, who was behind Duan Lingtian, stopped as well and turned around. Who are you all? Along with Shang Quan's surprised shout, Duan Lingtian turned around as well. With a glance, he saw the 3 nearby people. A dignified middle-aged man in green clothes and with an extraordinary bearing. Behind the middle-aged man, 2 old men followed. The old men both wore gray clothes, and even though their eyes were muddy, they gave out an oppressive feeling. 3 half-step void stage martial artists. Relying on his formidable spiritual force and the experience of rebirth martial emperor, Duan Lingtian perceived their rough cultivation levels at the first possible moment. Towards these 3 people appearing here, he didn't have to think to know that it was surely because of the Ma Clan auction house. Ma Clan auction house. Duan Lingtian's eyes flashed with a trace of a cold light. What he hated the most was people who didn't keep their word and stabbed another in the back. Duan Lingtian's gaze descended on the three people and he asked, in a deep voice, "You're members of the Ma clan?" "The Ma clan," the dignified middle-aged man in the lead said, with a sonorous voice. "Do you think that we look like Ma clan members?" Duan Lingtian's face sank when hearing the dignified middle-aged man's voice. "You're the person from room number 7. "Exactly." The dignified middle-aged man's gaze descended on the little gold mouse that lay on Kair's shoulder, then he glanced at Kair and Li Fei and a trace of surprise flashed within his eyes. "Kid, today, your wrong was that you shouldn't have bid with me for this gold for mouse. What a pity for these two little beauties, they're going to be buried with you today. Needless to say, your romantic fortune is really good." Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding. So it turned out that this person had come for the little gold mouse. Gold for mouse. Duan Lingtian snickered. He wondered if the middle-aged man knew the true identity of the little gold mouse. What sort of expression would the middle-aged man have if he found out? Maybe the middle-aged man would go wild with joy. "Are you that sure that you can kill me?" Duan Lingtian looked at the dignified middle-aged man with a calm gaze and spoke indifferently. As soon as he finished speaking, seeming to have noticed something, Duan Lingtian's brows rose and his gaze swept out into the distance. He noticed a figure that was concealed in the distance. This figure wasn't unfamiliar to him. The Ma clan auction house's manager, Ma Qin. Now he'd come to an understanding. It was surely Ma Qin who had come to an agreement with this middle-aged man and colluded with the middle-aged man to sell Duan Lingtian out. Ma Qin. Killing intent arose in Duan Lingtian's heart. "What, could it be that you think the four of you and this gold for mouse can go against us?" The middle-aged man couldn't stop himself from laughing when he heard what Duan Lingtian said, and his gaze when he looked at Duan Lingtian was as if he was looking at an extremely weak little kid, utterly not taking Duan Lingtian seriously. "You can try." Duan Lingtian grinned widely, and the smile on his face was filled with a trace of an evil smile. The middle-aged man frowned when faced with Duan Lingtian, who was as composed as ever, and he started to be on guard. The two old men behind him started to look around. After noticing that no one was concealed in their surroundings, the middle-aged man looked at Duan Lingtian, and a sneer appeared on the corners of his mouth. "You aren't thinking that acting deliberately mystifying before me will be of any use, right? Since you want to seek death, then I'll send you off. Old pung." Along with the middle-aged man's voice sounding out, one of the old men behind him flew out as if transforming into a swift cheetah, pouncing towards Duan Lingtian. Vast amounts of origin energy shook on the old man's body, and above him, 1,500 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared. Half-step void stage. Duan Lingtian's expression remained unchanged when faced with the old man that approached in full fury, and he slowly spoke with a cold and indifferent voice. "Shang Quan, I'll give you 2 breaths of time." "Yes, young master." And at almost the same time that Duan Lingtian's voice sounded out, Shang Quan replied, then made his move. His entire body instantly disappeared on the spot. Whoosh! An extremely swift sword light flashed by, and the head of the old man that rushed towards Duan Lingtian fell down. The other half of the old man's body spouted out fresh blood that was dazzling to the eyes, like a fountain. When Shang Quan appeared once again, he was already in front of the middle-aged man. 252 Chapter 253, He must die. In the instant that the old man was cut into two, the pupils of the middle-aged man and the other gray-clothed old man constricted, and their faces flushed red as if they were held by the neck by someone, completely unable to catch their breaths. And at the same instant, they were enraged to the point that their eyes were splitting. They only saw an incomparably swift figure arrive before them in the blink of an eye. At this moment, their heartbeats had completely stopped. Whoosh! Shang Quan raised his hand and a green sword light flashed by. On the sword light, a mysterious aura intertwined. Advanced sword force. Where the sword lights pointed at, 2 lines of blood whirled out. The middle-aged man and the gray-clothed old man maintained astonished expressions as their figures trembled and then crashed onto the ground without any signs of life. The eyes of the two were opened wide like saucers, dying with everlasting regret. Perhaps even in their wildest dreams, they'd never imagined that there would be such a terrifying existence by the side of the violet-clothed young man that they looked down upon. Void. Second level of the void prying stage. The body of Ma Qin, who was concealed far in the distance, trembled. His expression instantly went ghastly pale as he looked at the 3,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes in the sky, and his eyes revealed a sense of panic and terror. He never imagined that the 3 half-step void stage powerhouses would all die in the blink of an eye. And what he never imagined even more was that there would actually be a void-prying stage powerhouse by the violet-clothed young man's side. Moreover, it was a second-level void-prying stage powerhouse. At this moment, his heart was filled with regret. He shouldn't have been greedy. Now, not only was the 10+ million gold that he saw as already his gone, but he had even offended this violet-clothed young man that had a void-prying stage powerhouse by his side. I hope he won't pursue the matter further. Even though the possibility was extremely slim, this thought couldn't help but arise within Ma Qin's heart. Ma Qin, who had a perturbed expression, took a deep breath and silently prepared to leave. Whoosh! However, Ma Qin's face went completely deathly pale when he saw the person that had appeared before him block his path, and his voice trembled. Lord. Shang Quan stared at Ma Qin with a cold and indifferent gaze and paid no attention to him. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a sneer as he walked out in large strides to arrive before Ma Qin, and he looked at Ma Qin with a calm gaze. Manager Ma Qin, I trust you've been well since we parted. Putong. Ma Qin seemed to have seen a devil when he saw Duan Lingtian. He knelt down on the spot and his body shivered. Lord, spare me. I shouldn't have been greedy, I shouldn't have told them of Lord's whereabouts. Lord, I was wrong, please I beg you to spare me. HMPH. Duan Lingtian swept Ma Qin with a cold gaze, then he called the two little girls over before walking towards the Ma clan auction house. Shang Quan, bring him along. Ma clan, today I'll make you give me an explanation. Duan Lingtian's voice sounded out and caused Ma Qin's face to become incomparably ghastly pale. If the clan were to be alerted of this matter, he could imagine his end. What was most important to an auction house was its reputation. And now, for the sake of his selfish desire, he'd acted on his own and single-handedly destroyed the reputation of the Ma clan auction house. Within the Ma clan auction house, all the guests had already left, and only some Ma clan members remained. At the rear of the auction house, 4 old men were gathered there. Geezer who, when you saw that origin strengthening pill with a purity of 91% today, you were surely stunned, right? A robust old man in red clothes looked at Hu Jun and laughed. Do you have to ask? An origin strengthening pill with a purity of 91%. However, the luck of the young man is really not bad, being able to obtain such an origin strengthening pill and earning 8 million gold. A blue-clothed old man nodded, and a sense of jealousy appeared on his face. What a pity, we didn't collect the administration fee from the young man. That's 800,000 gold. A yellow-clothed old man sighed with a face full of regret. HMPH. Short-sighted. Selling out the origin strengthening pill with a purity of 91% also spread out the name of our Ma clan auction house. Are you still worried we can't recoup that mere 800,000 gold? Hu Jun glanced at the yellow-clothed old man in contempt. Your Ma clan auction house still has a reputation to talk about. Right at this moment, a cold and indifferent voice sounded out. It caused the faces of the 4 old men, including Hu Jun's, to go grim. Duan Lingtian walked in with large strides. It's you. Hu Jun recognized Duan Lingtian, and his eyes squinted. What do you mean by what you said earlier? Geezer who's he? The other 3 old men looked at Duan Lingtian and frowned. They were all dissatisfied with what Duan Lingtian said earlier. Hu Jun let out a breath and said, he's the guest that auctioned the 91% purity origin strengthening pill. Instantly, the 3 old men looked at Duan Lingtian in surprise. What is the meaning of what I said earlier? Duan Lingtian looked at Hu Jun and then said indifferently, then I want to know even more, what are the intentions of your Ma clan auction house? Shang Quan, bring him in. Shang Quan walked in with large strides, and he had a middle-aged man held in his hand. The middle-aged man had a deathly pale expression, and when he saw Hu Jun and the others, his gaze was averting them, vaguely showing a trace of dread. Manager Qin. Hu Jun frowned when he saw Ma Qin, who was held in Shang Quan's hand, and he looked at Duan Lingtian. Guest, aren't you going too far? Let him go. The red-clothed old man who had an explosive temper glared, then he took a step forward, wanting to seize Ma Qin from Shang Quan. Above him, 1,500 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. Obviously, he was in existence at the half-step void stage. HMPH. Shang Quan's gaze went cold. The strength of over 2,000 ancient mammoths exploded out with the rays of his hand, and his origin energy condensed into a palm and then smashed onto the red-clothed old man, blasting him flying. Bang! The red-clothed old man transformed into an arrow that had left the bowstring and fiercely smashed into the wall. Instantly, the entire wall broke into pieces, and a hideous fissure appeared there. Pooh! The red-clothed old man spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face went deathly pale when he gazed at the 2,000-plus ancient mammoth silhouettes that flashed above Shang Quan. Void prying stage. Not only was the red-clothed old man astonished, but the other three old men, including Hu Jun, all had deathly pale expressions. 3 half-step void stage martial artists. Not bad. Duan Lingtian's gaze flashed past the 3 old men besides Hu Jun and examined them before he slowly nodded. After hearing what Duan Lingtian said and then looking at Duan Lingtian's attitude, the 3 old men were angered to the point that their faces were green. However, when their gazes descended onto Shang Quan, they suppressed the rage in their hearts. Endure. They could only endure. Not to mention them, even the entire Ma clan would find it difficult to go against an existence at the void prying stage. Duan Lingtian wasn't surprised when he saw the old men go silent, as Shang Quan was sufficient to deter them. Duan Lingtian's gaze quickly descended onto Hu Jun and he said indifferently, "You asked me earlier if was going too far." Hu Jun's face was unsightly, but he still took a deep breath and said, "Guest, I want to know why you did this." "Why did I do this?" Duan Lingtian's eyes squinted, and he had an awe-inspiring killing intent on his figure as he looked at Ma Qin, who was held by Shang Quan. "You can ask him." Instantly, Hu Jun's gaze looked at Ma Qin. "Manager Qin, what actually happened?" Ma Qin's face was ghastly pale. How could he say it? Could he say that he was covetous of the violet-clothed young man's wealth and had joined hands to kill the violet-clothed young man and seize all his possessions? Ma Qin. The other 3 old men were all existences at the half-step void stage and were supreme elders of the Ma clan. Now, their gazes all descended onto Ma Qin. Ma Qin took a deep breath. He knew that he had to speak, and he hurriedly said, "Supreme elders, Lord Hu Jun, this is what happened. During tonight's auction, that Lord Sha Guang of the Jade Magnolia Trading Company was in room number 7, and he took a fancy to the gold for mouse that this guest here obtained. When the auction was about to finish, he looked for me and made a promise. So long as I tell him about the whereabouts of this guest, then after he killed this guest, he would only want the infant gold for mouse. And all the wealth in the possession of this guest would be mine." As he spoke up to this point, Ma Qin's face revealed a bitter smile. Hu Jun and the other old men's faces had went gloomy halfway through Ma Qin's explanation. And when they heard the entire story from Ma Qin, their faces were incomparably gloomy, and they glared angrily at Ma Qin. "Ma Qin, as the manager of the Ma clan auction house, not only did you not make a good example of yourself, but you colluded with others to make a move on a guest. Where do you place our Ma clan auction house? Where do you place the clan?" Even though Ma Qin hadn't finished speaking of what happened later on, they could roughly guess that the Jade Magnolia Trading Company's Sha Guang was probably dead. Ma Qin became dejected and despondent, as if he had lost all the strength in his body. He knew that even if the violet-clothed young man didn't kill him, and even if he could escape death, it would still be difficult for him to escape the punishment of the clan. His entire life could be considered to be destroyed. Destroyed by a single word: greed. If the heavens gave him a chance to do it all over again, he wouldn't dare be greedy even if he was beaten to death. But unfortunately, all this was only an extravagant hope, as there was no medicine for regret in the world. "Now you understand." Duan Lingtian's face flashed past the 4 old men, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. "Now, do you still think I'm going too far?" The corners of the 4 old men's mouths held bitter smiles, and Hu Jun took a deep breath. "Guest, all of this is the fault of our Ma clan auction house. So long as Guest is willing to minimize the problems and overlook them, we're willing to compensate you." "Yes." The other 3 old men hurriedly nodded. It would be fine if the young man was just ordinary, but the young man had a formidable void-prying stage powerhouse by his side. If they were to truly piss off the young man, not to mention the fact that they would surely die, it would be difficult even for their Ma clan to escape this calamity. Compensation. Duan Lingtian suddenly started laughing extremely heartily. If there's compensation, everything can be discussed. However, let me say it first, we can minimize the problems and overlook them, but he must die. As he finished speaking, Duan Lingtian's gaze descended onto Ma Qin's figure. Duan Lingtian's voice in Ma Qin's ears seemed to transform into a life-taking talisman, causing Ma Qin's face to go deathly pale. "Lord, spare me." 253 Chapter 254, Sha Guang's background. The culprit, Ma Qin. Duan Lingtian could imagine that if it wasn't for him having Shang Quan by his side, then today, he and the two girls by his side would surely be dead. So as far as Duan Lingtian was concerned, regardless of how the Ma clan's compensation was, Ma Qin must die. And at almost the exact same moment that Ma Qin pleaded for mercy, a blue afterimage flashed past him with a speed like wind, as if it was a ghost. Bang! The blue-clothed old man, one of the Ma clan's supreme elders, attacked out in rage, blasting Ma Qin to death with a single palm strike. The blue-clothed old man looked at Duan Lingtian and slowly said, "Even if Guest hadn't said anything, our Ma clan would not allow one who brings disgrace to the clan like this to continue living." Then, let's talk about the compensation. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a smile, and his gaze swept past the figures of the four old men, causing the old men to feel depressed and helpless. After all was said and done, their Ma clan auction house was indeed in the wrong. "Guest, please speak." Hu Jun took a deep breath. He'd already made the mental preparations to pay a large sum in compensation. 10 million gold, Duan Lingtian slowly said, with a carefree expression as if 10 million gold was nothing in his eyes. Hu Jun and the other old men were instead stupefied. They'd never imagined that the violet-clothed young man before them would demand such an exorbitant price. "Guest, this 10 million gold, isn't it too?" Hu Jun was in a difficult situation, as even to their Ma clan, 10 million gold wasn't a small sum. If they were to take out so much gold, their Ma clan would surely be greatly weakened. "What, think it's too much?" Duan Lingtian calmly glanced at Hu Jun. "Don't forget that today's incident was caused by your Ma clan. 0.10 million gold, send it to the flowing cloud in tonight. Otherwise, bear the consequences." After he finished, Duan Lingtian paid no attention to the four old men with flushed faces and directly left. This time, Duan Lingtian's group left the Ma clan auction house through the front door. It was late in the night now, and the alley at the door of the Ma clan auction house had quieted down. Only occasionally could some sparse pedestrians be seen. The flowing cloud inn was just a short distance to the front. When Duan Lingtian walked over to the auction house from the restaurant earlier, he'd seen this inn. Their group walked into the inn. And currently, the Ma clan estate's audience hall was lit up brightly by lanterns. Four old men and a middle-aged man stood together. At this moment, the middle-aged man's face was extremely unsightly. That Ma Qin actually caused such a disaster. He deserved to die. Ma Qin deserved to die. But Patriarch, that violet-clothed young man asked for 10 million gold. That is really going too far. Are we really going to give it to him? The yellow-clothed old man's voice was low, and it seemed to have slight rage mixed within. "Supreme Elder, if we don't give him 10 million gold, will you have another way to resolve the matter?" The middle-aged man, the Ma clan's patriarch, had an extremely unsightly expression as he spoke. The yellow-clothed old man was speechless. Did he have a way? No, he didn't consider himself capable of bearing the rage of that void-prying stage powerhouse by the violet-clothed young man's side. "I'll order someone to send this 10 million gold to him. However, our Ma clan's money isn't so easy to take. Later, when sending the money over, I'll order someone to send Sha Guang's corpse to the Jade Magnolia Trading Company's branch in Black Wind City." As the middle-aged man finished speaking, his eyes flickered with a strand of a fierce light, and within that strand was a trace of a scheming aura. Patriarch is wise. Instantly, the gazes of the four old men, including Hu Jun's, lit up. The Jade Magnolia Trading Company was one of the 7 great trading companies within the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, and there was no lack of void-prying stage martial artists within it. Sha Guang was the person in charge of the Jade Magnolia Trading Company's branch in Black Wind City. And most importantly, Sha Guang's father was the vice president of the Jade Magnolia Trading Company, and on top of that, his father was also a formidable void-prying stage powerhouse. That night, Duan Lingtian obtained the 10 million gold that the Ma clan sent over as he wished, and it caused him to be unable to stop himself from sighing with emotion. This money came too quickly. Deep in the night, Duan Lingtian cultivated as usual. 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, Worm Python Form. Presently, Duan Lingtian was still stuck in the 3rd level Origin Core stage bottleneck, and he was only half a step away from the 4th level of the Origin Core stage. I ought to be able to break through before arriving at the 7-star sword sect. Duan Lingtian let nature take its course and cultivated until deep into the night before falling into a deep slumber. At dawn the next day, after having breakfast with the 2 little girls, Duan Lingtian's group departed on 4 Fergana horses, going directly out of Black Wind City. And not long after Duan Lingtian's group of 4 left, another 2 Fergana horses pursued, following from afar. HMPH. After spurring their horses forward and going far away from Black Wind City, Duan Lingtian's gaze abruptly went cold. When he came out of the inn earlier, he noticed someone watching them from the shadows. In the beginning, he paid no attention to it. Now, when he noticed someone pursuing from far away, Duan Lingtian's face went gloomy. Duan Lingtian notified the 2 little girls and Shang Quan, then the 4 of them swung down the horse whips in their hands onto the Fergana horses, causing the Fergana horses to speed up and gallop madly. In an instant, they had created more distance between them and the 2 people behind. The 2 people who were following from behind were 2 middle-aged men. When they saw Duan Lingtian's group of 4 abruptly speeding up to disappear before their eyes, an anxious expression appeared on their faces, and they hurriedly spurred their horses to madly run forward. However, they quickly noticed that after galloping for some time, the road in front of them was peaceful, and they couldn't see the figures of the people they were following. Where are they? The 2 men looked at each other, and both had bewildered expressions. As far as they were concerned, the horses beneath them were Fergana horses as well, thus those 4 people should not be able to create so much distance between them. Are you 2 looking for us? Right at this moment, an voice sounded from behind them, causing their faces to go pale. When they turned their horses around, they saw their 4 targets spurring their horses to walk forward slowly, walking towards them. They noticed the middle-aged man among the 4 sweeping them with his icy cold gaze, and they couldn't help but have coldness arise within their hearts. They could perceive how terrifying this middle-aged man was. Their bodies lightly trembled, and traces of terror appeared in their eyes. Duan Lingtian looked at them with a calm gaze. Speak, why are you following me? Duan Lingtian's gaze went slightly cold when he saw the 2 of them seeming to be hesitant. If you don't speak, you 2 can die here today. Instantly, under Duan Lingtian's gaze, the faces of the 2 men went pale, and they hurriedly said, Lord, I'll speak, I'll speak. We're from the Jade Magnolia Trading Company's branch in Black Wind City. It was our vice president that asked us to follow you. Jade Magnolia Trading Company. Duan Lingtian's brows knitted. Only now did he recall that the Ma clan auction house's Ma Qin seemed to have mentioned this Jade Magnolia Trading Company yesterday. The middle-aged man that wanted the jade-eyed heavenly mouse seemed to be a member of the Jade Magnolia Trading Company. That middle-aged man and the 2 old men were all at the half-step void stage, so their status in the Jade Magnolia Trading Company ought to not be low. Why did he send you 2 to follow me? Duan Lingtian asked, in a deep voice. Lord, we aren't quite sure of the exact reason, we're only following orders. The 2 of them shook their heads. Duan Lingtian's gaze didn't leave them from beginning till the end, and in the end, he noticed that these 2 people seemed to not be lying. Recalling the middle-aged man from yesterday, Duan Lingtian asked, Do you 2 know Sha Guang? Sha Guang. The 2 of them hurriedly nodded upon hearing this. The president of our Jade Magnolia Trading Company's branch in Black Wind City is precisely Lord Sha Guang. The president of the Jade Magnolia Trading Company's branch in Black Wind City. Duan Lingtian's eyes squinted, as he never imagined that the middle-aged man from yesterday had such a background. It looked like the spatial ring that he casually took from Sha Guang ought to have quite a large amount of wealth within it. Right at this moment, Shang Quan looked at the 2 of them and asked, This Sha Guang, what relationship does he have with your Jade Magnolia Trading Company's main branch's vice president, Sha Do? The 2 men answered after hearing what Shang Quan asked. Lord Sha Guang is precisely the only son of Lord Sha Do. Duan Lingtian noticed that when Shang Quan heard what the 2 of them said, he frowned. Scram, if I notice you following me again, you 2 will surely die. Duan Lingtian's icy cold gaze swept past the 2 men, causing the 2 men to feel a sense of relief and reveal overjoyed expressions before spurring their horses to kick up a cloud of dust, not daring to turn around. Duan Lingtian noticed something wrong in Shang Quan's expression, so he curiously asked, Shang Quan, you know Sha Do? Young master, that Sha Do is the vice president of the Jade Magnolia Trading Company's main branch, and I've had dealings with him before. His strength was on par with mine when my strength was at its prime, Shang Quan respectfully said. 6th level of the void prying stage. Duan Lingtian nodded. That year, when he had just encountered Shang Quan, he still remembered what Shang Quan had told him. Shang Quan at his prime had a cultivation at the 6th level of the void prying stage. Young master, the people from the Jade Magnolia Trading Company were probably following you because of the Ma clan. Should we Shang Quan waved the hand sign for killing. A mere Ma clan is nothing. Hurrying on with our journey is more important now. We have to arrive at the 7-star sword sect as soon as possible. If we're late to the 7-star sword sect's outer court disciple test 3 months from now, then we'll have to wait another 6 months. Duan Lingtian shook his head. Just like he said, he completely looked down upon the Ma clan. If they turned back now and annihilated the Ma clan, it would only be a waste of time. As far as he was concerned, if he delayed entering the 7-star sword sect because of the matter with the Ma clan, then the losses would outweigh the benefits. Yes, Shang Quan nodded. To him, whatever the young master says, goes. He was only a servant of the young master. The 4 of them continued to hurry on their journey. Squeak squeak, at an unknown time, the little gold mouse had awoken from its deep sleep, and after noticing it was on a Fergana horse, it was extremely thrilled. It then jumped onto the head of the Fergana horse and nodded to Kair like a human. It was extremely happy. Hiss hiss, seeming to have been awakened by the little gold mouse, Little Black and Little White poked their heads out from Duan Lingtian's sleeve and looked at the little mouse. Their gold and silver eyes flickered with strands of bright lights. Squeak, the little gold mouse looked at the 2 little pythons, then it actually turned its body around and shook its ass at them. 254 Chapter 255, Black Bamboo City. Duan Lingtian and the 2 little girls couldn't help but start laughing when they saw the actions of the little gold mouse. Whoosh, whoosh, the eyes of the 2 little pythons went cold, and they transformed into 2 bolts of lightning that flew out, opening their mouths to bite at the little gold mouse. 800 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared above each of them. Little Black, Little White, don't! Kair exclaimed in surprise. She wanted to stop them, but it was already too late. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse wasn't afraid in the slightest when facing the 2 little pythons, and it raised its claws to slap out towards them. 1,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form above it. The 2 little pythons were successively slapped down by the little gold mouse's claws. Although the little pythons weren't a match for the little gold mouse, it didn't dare attack with a killing blow, as it noticed the gaze of warning that Duan Lingtian shot at it. Hiss hiss, the 2 little pythons felt pain, but they were still unwilling and continued to confront the little gold mouse. Little Black, Little White, come back. Duan Lingtian shook his head and laughed. He never thought that these 2 little fellows were so aggressive. He didn't even react until after they had fought with the little gold mouse. Whoosh, whoosh, the 2 little pythons returned onto Duan Lingtian's hand, but their eyes still stared fixedly at the little gold mouse. The little gold mouse was unwilling to lag behind. It twisted its ass around and swayed its ass at the 2 little pythons in provocation. That's about enough. Noticing the mood of the 2 little pythons becoming restless and slightly losing control, Duan Lingtian looked at the little gold mouse and frowned. The little gold mouse seemed to be slightly afraid of Duan Lingtian, and it obediently lied down. Alright, you 2 little fellows will surpass it sooner or later. You 2 are younger than it by more than a year. After a year, you 2 will surely be stronger than it is now. Duan Lingtian noticed that the 2 little pythons were still unwilling to return into his sleeve, so he comforted them. Of course, he wasn't talking nonsense when he said this. Based on his observations of the 2 little pythons for almost 3 years, their potential was absolutely not inferior to the jade-eyed heavenly mouse, and when they matured in the future, they might become existences comparable to demon emperors. The 2 little pythons were both very fierce beasts, and there weren't any records of the 2 little pythons within the memories of Rebirth Martial Emperor. But based on their recent growth rate, they'd long since surpassed the growth rate of most demon beasts. Hiss hiss, hearing Duan Lingtian's comforting words, the 2 little pythons obediently returned to his sleeve. This caused the 2 little girls to laugh helplessly as well. The 2 little pythons and the little gold mouse simply seemed as if they were born to be enemies. That Sha Guang really let me gain a lot this time. Duan Lingtian withdrew the 3 spatial rings. They were precisely the spatial rings of Sha Guang and the 2 old men. There wasn't much within the spatial rings of the 2 old men, but there was a large amount of wealth within the spatial ring of Sha Guang. The origin strengthening pill that he'd refined had returned to his possession, and the light edge inscription that was inscribed on a ring was there too. He left all these at that because they were worthless to him. Most importantly, there was an entire 20 million gold in Sha Guang's spatial ring. Now the combined wealth in Duan Lingtian's possession had already come close to 50 million gold. Hurrying on their journey at a gallop, after 2 months' time, Duan Lingtian's group finally arrived at a city near the 7-star sword sect. This city had an area that wasn't inferior in size to Black Wind City. Duan Lingtian found out the name of this city by looking at the 3 words above the city's gate. Black Bamboo City. At the beginning, Duan Lingtian still found it difficult to understand why a city would have such a poetic name. And only after he entered the city and saw the black bamboos that were jet black like ink that rose up from the ground that he came to a sudden understanding. So this was the origin of the name, Black Bamboo City. Along the way, Duan Lingtian saw some people who wore a uniform, green-colored attire. These people were mostly young men and women. The same symbol was embroidered on their clothes. A sword encircled by 7 stars. Duan Lingtian looked at Shangquan and asked curiously, "They're all members of the 7-star sword sect?" Li Fei and Kaur, who wore veils, looked at Shangquan as well, and their beautiful eyes had a sense of wondering mixed within. Shangquan nodded. "Yes, young master, this is the uniform attire of the 7-star sword sect. The 7 stars on the symbol of an outer court disciple's clothes are copper in color. They're silver for the inner court disciples, and gold for the 7-star sword sect elders." Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding. The 7-star sword sect's test is another half a month away. Let's first look for a place to stay in. Before long, Duan Lingtian directly bought a courtyard house. "Shangquan, you can't follow us to the 7-star sword sect, so you'll stay here from now on," Duan Lingtian said to Shangquan. "If I have anything I need you to do in the future, I'll come look for you." "Yes, young master," Shangquan hurriedly nodded in a respectful manner. 10 days later, bang, origin energy rushed out from within Duan Lingtian's body. He had finally broken through the final bottleneck of the 3rd level of the origin core stage and smoothly stepped into the 4th level of the origin core stage. Lightly using strength, 71 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared above Duan Lingtian. The strength of 71 ancient mammoths. Compared to ordinary 4th level origin core martial artists, he had entire strength of 11 ancient mammoths more. Even if compared to an ordinary 5th level origin core martial artist, he still had an extra strength of 1 ancient mammoth. A brilliant smile appeared on Duan Lingtian's face. "I've finally broken through." After breaking through, Duan Lingtian's mood was elated, and he called Shangquan before leaving the courtyard house with the 2 little girls and finding a restaurant to have a meal. The restaurant was ancient-styled, giving one an extremely comfortable feeling. Duan Lingtian brought the 2 little girls to find a table that was beside a window, then he sat down and ordered some dishes. 7-star sword sect inner court disciples. Duan Lingtian's sharp eyes noticed with a glance that amongst the 3 7-star sword sect disciples in the neighboring table, the stars that encircled the sword-on symbol of one of their clothes was silver. This young man that was around the age of 25 was obviously a 7-star sword sect inner court disciple. Relying on his formidable spiritual force and the experience of rebirth martial emperor, Duan Lingtian could confirm that the strength of this 7-star sword sect disciple ought to be at the 7th level of the origin core stage or above. Merely around 25 and at the 7th level of the origin core stage or above. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be astounded. As expected of an inner court disciple of a top sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, the 7-star sword sect. After all, among the martial artists of the younger generation that he knew of, when they were around this age, the strongest amongst them was the junior Marquis of the Divine Might Marquis Estate, Ni Fen. However, even though Ni Fen was older than this 7-star sword sect inner court disciple, his strength was inferior. As for the other 2 young men, they were around 22 and 23, and they were 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. Their strengths weren't weak either, they were both at the 4th level of the origin core stage or above. Looks like even little Fei can only be considered to have ordinary natural talent once she's at the 7-star sword sect, Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. Li Fei was 21 this year, and she had broken through to the 3rd level of the origin core stage a month ago. Of course, the reason why Li Fei had her current cultivation was because she consumed the high-purity medicinal pills that Duan Lingtian refined. Before long, their food had arrived, and Duan Lingtian's group of 3 started eating. Squeak squeak, the 3 of them had only started eating for a while when the little gold mouse sprung out from under Kaur's sleeve. Its green eyes flickered with a strange light as it stared at the food on the table and gulped down a mouthful of saliva like a human. "What, you want to eat too?" Duan Lingtian noticed the little gold mouse's current appeared and couldn't refrain from laughing. The little gold mouse hurriedly nodded. Duan Lingtian blinked his eyes and said to the little gold mouse, "Come, roll twice and I'll let you eat." Unexpectedly, the little gold mouse raised its head and showed an arrogant and disdainful expression as it ignored Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian's face sank. This little gold mouse is really intelligent. Duan Lingtian could almost be certain now that the little gold mouse was absolutely able to completely understand human speech, and not only that, its intelligence wasn't inferior to a human's. Scoundrel, don't bully little gold. Li Fei rolled her eyes at Duan Lingtian, then she clamped up a piece of meat and put it before the little gold mouse. The little gold mouse picked up the piece of meat and started nibbling on it with gusto. As it nibbled, it looked in anticipation at K'er. K'er couldn't help but laugh. She picked up a few pieces of meat and then placed them before the little gold mouse. The little gold mouse nodded in satisfaction. Right at this moment, Duan Lingtian heard an exclamation in surprise from the neighboring table. "Senior brother, is that a gold for mouse?" This was something said by one of the two seven-star sword sect outer court disciples from the neighboring table. The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple couldn't help but turn his head and look at Duan Lingtian's table when he heard what the outer court disciple said. The other outer court disciple looked over with a curious expression as well. Infant gold for mouse. The eyes of that seven-star sword sect inner court disciple lit up, and a flowing light of greed flashed within his eyes as if he'd seen some sort of treasure. Although the greed within the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple's eyes flashed by quickly, Duan Lingtian still noticed it, but he paid no attention to it. An infant gold for mouse indeed posed an extremely large temptation to a martial artist below the void prying stage. So beautiful. Right at this moment, one of the seven-star sword sect inner court disciples noticed the appearance of K'er, who had already removed her veil and started eating, and his eyes shone. The other seven-star sword sect outer court disciple looked at K'er as well when he heard what the other outer court disciple said, and a trace of a burning gaze flashed within his eyes. Only that seven-star sword sect inner court disciple glanced indifferently at K'er, then his gaze once again descended onto the little gold mouse. His interest for the little gold mouse was obviously more than his interest towards K'er. Duan Lingtian didn't continue to look at those three seven-star sword sect disciples, and his gaze returned to the little gold mouse, then he shook his head and smiled. This little gold is a glutton like little black and little white. And at the moment Duan Lingtian finished speaking, a burst of agitated movement occurred within his sleeve. Obviously, it was the two little fellows concealed under Duan Lingtian's sleeve that were unhappy when they heard what Duan Lingtian said. Duan Lingtian shook the two little pythons that were concealed under his sleeve and coiled around his arm and comforted them with a light voice. "All right, I won't talk about you two." Only then did the two little pythons quiet down. Suddenly, Duan Lingtian frowned. Because he noticed that the seven-star sword sect's inner court disciple had stood up and was slowly walking over to their table. He was coming over with bad intentions. 255 Chapter 256, Fence Sitter. This seven-star sword sect inner court disciple around the age of 25 had an ordinary appearance, but a trace of gloominess was vaguely mixed between his brows. The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple arrived before Duan Lingtian's table and indifferently said, "How much do you want for this infant gold for mouse?" "I'm buying it." K'er's beautiful brows frowned when she heard this. She was slightly unhappy. The little gold mouse seemed to have understood what the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple said, and it glared its jade green eyes at him while baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. However, with the little gold mouse's fluffy fur, even if it acted fierce, it didn't have any power of deterrence. Green-eyed gold for mouse. The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple's eyes shone, and the first thought that arose within his heart was, "I've encountered a variant gold for mouse." A gold for mouse when grown to its peak would possess a strength at the half-step void stage. If it was a variant gold for mouse, it could even break through to the void stage and become a demon beast. Duan Lingtian noticed the greedy light that arose within the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple's eyes, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer as he said indifferently, "Leave, we're not selling it." "We're not selling it." What Duan Lingtian said caused the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple to be stupefied. Do you know who I am?" The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple looked at Duan Lingtian and intentionally lifted up his chest, causing the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple symbol to be completely revealed. "Are you putting on a monkey show?" Duan Lingtian frowned and was slightly impatient. "I know you're a seven-star sword sect inner court disciple. But so what about it? Could it be that since you're a seven-star sword sect inner court disciple, I must give up a cherished possession and sell this little gold mouse to you?" "Putting on a monkey show?" The 7-star sword sect inner court disciple's face went grim when he heard what Duan Lingtian said, and he said, in a low voice, "Kid, be careful, misfortune comes from the mouth." When had he even been humiliated by someone like this? As far as he was concerned, this sentence that was similar to a joke was no different from humiliation. Seeing the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple suddenly turning hostile, Duan Lingtian swept him with a calm gaze, then he lowered his head to continue eating, not paying any more attention to him. The 7-star sword sect inner court disciple thought Duan Lingtian was afraid of him when he saw Duan Lingtian doing this, and he sneered. Really a contemptible wretch. He raised his hand as he spoke and a stack of silver appeared out of thin air, then he slapped it on the table and said, in a low voice, "This is 100,000 silver to buy your infant gold for mouse." 100,000 silver? Duan Lingtian was stunned. He swallowed the mouthful of food in his mouth, then he glanced at the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple as if he was looked at an idiot. "I'll give you 1,000,000 silver to get me another infant gold for mouse. How about it?" K'er and Li Fei's beautiful eyebrows lightly frowned as well, and they had faces of dissatisfaction. This 7-star sword sect inner court disciple was really going too far. Right at this moment, the other two 7-star sword sect outer court disciples stood behind the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple and stared fiercely at Duan Lingtian, and one of them threatened, "Kid, if you're sensible, hurry and hand over the infant gold for mouse. My senior brother is someone you can't afford to offend." Exactly, our senior brother is an outstanding inner court disciple of the 7-star sword sect, and he is an existence that will become a 7-star sword sect elder in the future. If you're sensible, give this infant gold for mouse to our senior brother. In this way, you might be able to form some good faith, the other 7-star sword sect outer court disciple said to Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian's eyes squinted, and he looked at the two 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. "According to what you two have said, submissively giving this infant gold for mouse to your senior brother now is my most sensible and wisest choice." Of course, the two 7-star sword sect outer court disciples said at the same time. Ha ha, the corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a smile, and he raised his hand to grasp the little gold mouse. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse nodded to Duan Lingtian and bared its claws and brandished its fangs, then it turned around to look at the three 7-star sword sect disciples. Duan Lingtian naturally was able to discern what the little gold mouse meant. The little gold mouse was currently asking him if it could attack and kill these three hateful fellows. Duan Lingtian naturally believed that the little gold mouse had the ability, but he shook his head. If these three 7-star sword sect disciples were really killed by the little gold mouse, then he would have really come for nothing this time. At that time, the 7-star sword sect would absolutely not allow him to enter the sect. "Kid, you're sensible." One of the 7-star sword sect outer court disciples saw Duan Lingtian shake his head and thought that Duan Lingtian was refusing the little gold mouse's request to stay with him, and the corners of that 7-star sword sect outer court disciple curled into a complacent smile. Not only was it him, even the other 7-star sword sect outer court disciple and the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple had the same thought. The 7-star sword sect inner court disciple's face revealed a smile of victory. He looked at Duan Lingtian and extended out his hand. Duan Lingtian's brows knitted, and he coldly swept the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple with his gaze and said in vigilance, "What are you doing?" The 7-star sword sect inner court disciple's face sank. "Kid, are you playing tricks on me?" "Playing tricks on you?" Duan Lingtian was stunned. When did he play tricks on this fellow? "Scoundrel, he thought you were persuading little gold to follow him earlier," Li Fei said to Duan Lingtian, as she'd noticed everything that happened earlier. Duan Lingtian frowned and impatiently said, "Look, is there something wrong in your head? Didn't I say I'm not selling it earlier? Hurry up and leave, we still want to eat." "Kid, you." The 7-star sword sect inner court disciple's face went gloomy, then his extended hand fiercely exerted force, origin energy raged out, and above him, 110 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. 8th level of the origin core stage. What, you still want to forcefully seize it? A 7-star sword sect inner court disciple can be so overbearing. Duan Lingtian's face sank, and his burning gaze stared fixedly on that 7-star sword sect inner court disciple. Meanwhile, the crowd of customers in the restaurant shot their gazes at the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple. A 7-star sword sect inner court disciple is seizing another's things. It can't be. The 7-star sword sect has always been strict and impartial with its rules. They strictly forbid their disciples from using their strength to bully the weak. Didn't this little brother say that this 7-star sword sect inner court disciple wanted to seize his things? The crowd of customers discussed animatedly. When the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple noticed the surrounding gazes, his face sank, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer as he said, in a loud voice, "Kid, you've already sold this gold for mouse to me. Now you're going back on your word. I'm only taking back my own belongings." So it's like that. Like I said, the 7-star sword sect disciples would not use their strength to bully the weak. One must have integrity. Since you've agreed with someone, then you must do as you say. This young man has gone too far. The customers present came to a sudden understanding, and for a moment, they all stood at the side of the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple and denounced Duan Ling Tian. Shameless. Li Fei and Kair were angered to the point that their faces flushed red when they heard what the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple said, as they never imagined that a 7-star sword sect inner court disciple would actually talk irresponsibly like this. Haha, looks like within the entire 7-star sword sect, not everyone can abide by the rules of the sect. Duan Ling Tian laughed. He laughed brilliantly, and his gaze descended onto the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple. "Kid, you don't have to give excuses. You've already agreed to sell this infant gold for mouse to me, now hand it over. I'll give you a chance, otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless." The 7-star sword sect inner court disciple stared at Duan Ling Tian and dense killing intent flickered deep within his eyes. "Young man, since you've already agreed, then hand it over to him. Yeah, as the saying goes, a man is nothing without his word. Integrity is extremely important, and there's no need to lose your life because of this. Young people nowadays are really ignorant." The spectating customers spoke out one by one, some advised Duan Ling Tian and some lectured him. Duan Ling Tian directly ignored these fence-sitters. Talking endlessly when they didn't know anything, did they really think they were impartial saints? "Kid, public rage is difficult to go against. Just obediently hand over the infant gold for mouse." The 7-star sword sect inner court disciple couldn't help but reveal a trace of complacency when he heard so many people helping him denounce Duan Ling Tian. "Exactly, hurry up and hand it over. Otherwise, we'll make you bear the consequences. Kid, be sensible, or else I'll throw you out." The other two 7-star sword sect outer court disciples cooperated as they talked down to Duan Ling Tian and were on their high horses. 7-star sword sect. The smile on the corners of Duan Ling Tian's mouth grew wider. Sure enough, there were black eggs everywhere. Even the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's top sect, the 7-star sword sect, wasn't excluded. These 3 7-star sword sect disciples had taken a fancy towards the little gold mouse, so they left no means unused, turning black into white, and for the sake of achieving their goal they would stop at nothing. Duan Ling Tian looked at the 3 7-star sword sect disciples and indifferently asked, "What if I don't hand it over?" He had a carefree expression. It was as if he didn't take the 3 of them seriously at all. Actually, he indeed didn't take them seriously. It was only 3 existences at the origin core stage. The 7-star sword sect inner court disciple's face sank, and he said, with righteous indignation, "Kid, looks like you're intentionally playing tricks on us." The origin energy in his hand raged restlessly. Everything he said now was obviously providing a basis for his ruthless attack in the next moment. In this way, he would be in the right, and no one would say it was a 7-star sword sect disciple who took advantage of his sect to bully another. And the truth was precisely like this. Hearing what the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple said, the sounds of sighing with emotion sounded out within the restaurant as expected. Young people nowadays are too rash. Not to mention not keeping to their words, they have so many excuses and are so arrogant. Today, he can only blame himself if he's killed by this 7-star sword sect inner court disciple. Exactly. If he dies, he will have died for nothing. After all, he isn't in the right. Voice after voice helped the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple build up the circumstances a step further. "You all, how can you all be like this? Young master didn't agree to sell little gold to them at all." Kair's beautiful face flushed red when she heard the discussions of the restaurant customers, and she explained for Duan Ling Tian. 256 Chapter 257, Shadow. Kair, it isn't necessary for you to explain to them, they're only a crowd of fence-sitters. Li Fei extended out her hand that was pure white like jade and lightly patted the back of Kair's hand. What Li Fei said naturally caused public outrage. "Little girl, mind what you say. Exactly, on what basis are you calling us fence-sitters? Could it be that what you mean is that this 7-star sword sect inner court disciple is intentionally accusing all of you unjustly? Is there any need for a 7-star sword sect inner court disciple to accuse you unjustly? The crowd of customers all glared at Li Fei. When had Li Fei ever experienced such a scene? For a moment, she was angered to the point that her face flushed red, she clenched her fist tightly, and her delicate figure lightly trembled. Abruptly, a loud sound echoed out, and the clamorous noise within the restaurant abruptly stopped. It was Duan Lingtian who had slapped his palm on the table. Shut up. At this moment, Duan Lingtian's face was extremely grim. These people could talk about him, as at most he would just laugh it off. But these people actually dared talk about Li Fei, dared talk about his woman. This was something that he couldn't tolerate. Meanwhile, the gazes of the crowd of customers in the restaurant descended onto Duan Lingtian, and most of them revealed sneers, as they were waiting for the 7-star sword sect disciple to teach Duan Lingtian a lesson. What, kid, you're getting angry from embarrassment? The 7-star sword sect inner court disciple had a smile of ridicule on his face. He never imagined that the development of events would actually completely turn towards him. He knew that it was time. Now, even if he attacked, no one would think that he relied on the backing of the 7-star sword sect to bully another. Duan Lingtian looked at the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple with a gaze that contained a piercingly cold light. He had already lost all patience in playing with this 7-star sword sect inner court disciple. Shang Quan, throw all of them out. The 3 7-star sword sect disciples couldn't help but laugh when they heard what Duan Lingtian said. Even most of the customers within the restaurant couldn't refrain from laughing. Not to mention the fact that the strength of the 7-star sword sect's inner court disciple was shocking. Even if someone had a strength that surpassed a 7-star sword sect inner court disciple, they still wouldn't dare act rashly. After all, doing so would directly offend the 7-star sword sect. The 7-star sword sect was a top sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. How could it be something that anyone would offend? However, their smiles quickly froze. Because they saw. Yes, young master, Shang Quan replied, then his figure flashed out as if transforming into a gust of wind. At the instant that the smiles of the 3 7-star sword sect disciples froze, Shang Quan attacked out like a bolt of lightning, catching them one by one and directly throwing them out of the restaurant. Bang, 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 3 loud crashes sounded from outside the restaurant, and accompanying the crashes were 3 shrill cries. The restaurant went deathly silent, as all the customers within were dumbstruck. They weren't dumbstruck by the nascent soul stage strength that Shang Quan revealed. Instead, they were dumbstruck by the fact that Shang Quan dared to touch a 7-star sword sect disciple. The 7-star sword sect was famous for being protective of their own. They thought that this middle-aged man would surely meet great disaster since he dared to touch 7-star sword sect disciples. How would they know that those 3 7-star sword sect disciples wouldn't go to the sect elders about this matter? Them being on the right was only a false front. The 7-star sword sect elders weren't stupid and weren't so easy to bluff. Buying an infant goldfur mouse for 100,000 silver. This was already relying on the backing of the sect to bully another. So the 3 7-star sword sect disciples fiercely glared at Duan Lingtian before leaving with their tails between their legs. Senior brother, could it be that we're to let it go at that? One of the 7-star sword sect outer court disciples had a face full of unwillingness. What else can you do? I never expected him to have a nascent soul martial artist by his side. The face of the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple sank. He originally thought that the infant goldfur mouse could be easily obtained, but never had he expected that such an unforeseen event would occur. Senior brother, your 100,000 silver seems to still be on their table. Should we go back and take it? The other 7-star sword sect outer court disciple had a flash of light in his head, and he recalled this matter. Why don't you go take it? I'll give you half if you do. The 7-star sword sect inner court disciple glared at this 7-star sword sect outer court disciple, causing the latter to have a bitter smile on his face. He didn't dare to make another sound. Damn it, if it wasn't for that nascent soul martial artist being present, I'd surely make that violet-clothed young man die. The 7-star sword sect inner court disciple's face was gloomy as he said this in a deep voice. Suddenly, one of the 7-star sword sect outer court disciples' eyes flickered as he guessed, Senior brother, our 7-star sword sect outer court disciples test is in 5 days. Do you think they came here for this? According to their accent, they don't seem to be from the area near Black Bamboo City. Right, senior brother, there really is such a possibility. The other 7-star sword sect outer court disciples' gaze lit up. Now that you mention it, there really is this possibility. HMPH, if you really have come to enter our 7-star sword sect, then you're delivering yourself to me, and I'll surely make you die. The eyes of the 7-star sword sect inner court disciple went cold. He seemed as if he wanted to catch and swallow Duan Lingtian, and his icy cold voice seemed to come from a thaw hole that was filled with piercingly cold winds. Within it was a breathtaking killing intent. If he enters the 7-star sword sect, that nascent soul stage martial artist by his side will be unable to protect him. The other 2 7-star sword sect outer court disciples started laughing. Within the restaurant, after Shang Quan revealed a strength at the nascent soul stage, the crowd of customers instantly shut their mouths and went quiet, fearing that they would piss off the violet-clothed young man. They didn't doubt it in the slightest that if they dared to talk too much, based on the violet-clothed young man's temper, he would definitely not hesitate in asking the nascent soul stage martial artist by his side to make a move against them. The violet-clothed young man feared the people behind the 3 7-star sword sect disciples, and thus didn't dare go for the kill, but he wouldn't fear them. All right, little Fei, don't be angry. Duan Lingtian looked at Li Fei, then his gaze went cold as it swept past the customers. How about this, so long as you say the word, I'll ask Shang Quan to throw them all out right away. Duan Lingtian said this in a very casual manner, but in the ears of the crowd of customers, it was like the sound of thunder. When they raised their heads, they noticed the middle-aged man that tossed the 7-star sword sect disciples out earlier looking at them with a burning gaze. Instantly, all the customers were in a commotion, as they directly put down the money for their food and wine and then left the restaurant as if they were fleeing. In the next moment, only one table of people remained within the restaurant, as well as the dumbstruck manager and attendants of the restaurant. PFF'd. Seeing this scene, Li Fei finally couldn't hold back her laughter, and she laughed charmingly and enchantingly. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be dumbstruck. He wished for nothing more than to push Li Fei down and come down on her to his heart's content. Scoundrel, what are you looking at? Li Fei rolled her eyes at Duan Lingtian, and her tone was filled with shyness. Truly an attractive and coquettish little girl. At this moment, Duan Lingtian felt his lower regions get hot, and he forcefully endured his urges and took a deep breath. Big Sister Fei, young master has been entranced by you, Kair lightly smiled and said to Li Fei, as she stroked the little gold mouse. Li Fei's beautiful face flushed to the point that it seemed as if it would drip blood when she heard Kair, and at the same time, she stretched out her hand to scratch Kair. Little Sister Kair, what did you say? Ah, so itchy. Big Sister Fei, spare me. I didn't say anything, I didn't say anything. Kair hurriedly pleaded for mercy. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse seemed to turn into a spectator when it saw this scene, and it joyfully watched Kair and Li Fei playing. Its pair of jade green eyes spun as they flickered with a strange luster. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled, and his mood was slightly better. 7-star sword sect, once I, Kair, and Li Fei enter it, we will be bound to encounter those 3 from before. I hope they can be sensible and won't look for trouble with me again. Otherwise, HMPH. Suddenly, seeming to have recalled something, a trace of a cold light flashed within Duan Lingtian's eyes. Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, Imperial City. What did you say? You said my son is dead. In a spacious courtyard house, an aged old man stared at the middle-aged man that stood before him, and his eyes revealed a dense killing intent. Yes, the middle-aged man's body shivered. The old man that currently stood before him was an existence that summoned wind and called for rain within the Jade Magnolia Trading Company, the vice president of the entire Jade Magnolia Trading Company, Shadow. An existence at the 6th level of the void-prying stage. Enraged, a terrifying pressure was emitted from Shadow and enveloped the middle-aged man, causing his breathing to become difficult. Guang, Shadow exclaimed grievously, and his muddled eyes instantly emitted a bright light that flickered with a scarlet-red killing intent. The middle-aged man's face went pale as he felt the aura being emitted from Shadow's body growing larger and larger, and he gritted his teeth as he endured. He believed that if this were to continue, it probably wouldn't be long before he would collapse on the ground. Finally, the raging aura that stretched out from Shadow's body vanished, and the terrifying pressure vanished with it, allowing the middle-aged man to catch his breath and heave a sigh of relief. Speak, what happened? Who killed my son? Shadow looked at the middle-aged man, and his eyes were filled with a dense, cold light that seemed to be waiting to swallow someone. The middle-aged man let out a breath of cold air. At this moment, he had the illusion that instead of a person standing before him now, it was a venomous snake, a terrifying venomous snake that could make one die in an instant. Lord Shadow, the person who did it was in existence at the void-prying stage. The middle-aged man caught his breath and slowly said, "This matter happened after the Ma Clan auction house's auction 3 months ago." Subsequently, the middle-aged man spoke of everything he learned from Black Wind City's Ma Clan. A violet-clothed young man took out a 91% purity origin strengthening pill. Shadow's face sank. When he heard this, even he couldn't help but be surprised. A medicinal pill with a purity of 91%. In the past, in his opinion, this was something that was practically impossible to exist. Now, he couldn't help but be slightly afraid. If that person was able to take out such an origin-strengthening pill, did it mean that behind that person was a formidable alchemist? Perhaps the middle-aged man discerned Shadow's fear, and he added, "Lord Shadow, according to the Ma Clan, that origin-strengthening pill was something the young man obtained by chance. And he doesn't have any relations to the alchemist that refined that origin-strengthening pill." Shadow heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this, and his eyes contained an awe-inspiring killing intent. "I'll make a trip to the Black Wind City with you. No matter who it is that dared kill my son, even if I have to dig to the ends of the earth, I'll still drag him out." 257 Chapter 258, 7-Star Sword Sect. The 7-Star Sword Sect had 7 peaks that stood perfectly straight. The 7 peaks rose straight from level ground, like 7 sharp swords that shot into the sky. These 7 peaks were also called as the 7-Star Sword Sect's 7 Great Sword Peaks. The 7 Great Sword Peaks were named based on the Ursa Major constellation. They were respectively the Dubi Peak, Merik Peak, Fekta Peak, Megrez Peak, Aliath Peak, Mizar Peak, and Alcade Peak. Among them, the Dubi Peak was the main peak, and it was the most towering sword peak that had a grand imposing manner. The other 6 sword peaks were spread around the Dubi Peak, like a host of lesser stars around the leading star, surrounding Dubi Peak in the middle. Only on this peak are the clouds so deep that one does not know where one is. Duan Lingtian listened to Shang Quan's introduction, then he gazed from afar at the 7 sword peaks that had clouds coiled around them. His heart was filled with shock. This was the 7-Star Sword Sect. "Young master, there seems to be something stop the surrounding 6 sword peaks' connection to the Dubi Peak." K.'s eyes were sharp and noticed the scene when the clouds and mist cleared away. Duan Lingtian glanced over when he heard K.'. When the clouds and mist cleared away, it could be seen that above the 6 sword peaks surrounding Dubi Peak was indeed a thing that was similar to a black-colored chain that connected to Dubi Peak. "Young master, it is said that only the main peak, the Dubi Peak, has a path to ascend the peak among the 7 great sword peaks of 7-Star Sword Sect. The other 6 sword peaks don't possess a path to ascend the peak, so unless one is in existence at the void-prying stage, they can't climb the other 6 sword peaks." Shang Quan spoke of everything he knew. "So if you want to ascend the other 6 sword peaks, then you must pass through the main peak and use the chain bridges on the main peak to enter them." Chain bridges. Duan Lingtian came to a sudden understanding. So in this way, there's only one path to ascend to the peak of this 7-Star Sword Sect, and that is the path up the Dubi Peak. The defense of this sect can be called amazing. With only one path, it was completely possible for one man to hold the pass and hold back all the enemy forces. Coupled with the hidden forces of the 7-Star Sword Sect, even if the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Imperial family were to personally come here, they might not be able to obtain any benefit. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian's group of 4 arrived at the foot of one of the sword peaks. The part of the sword peak that was immersed in the ground was incomparably precipitous, and one couldn't see the end of it with a glance. Such a precipitous cliff, even a half-step void stage martial artist probably wouldn't be able to ascend it. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be astounded as he sighed with emotion. Before long, Duan Lingtian noticed that wasn't just him and the 2 little girls by his side that were sighing with emotion. Many young men and women had gathered here from various places and were pointing at the sword peak. Their discussions also had exclamations of surprise mixed within. Duan Lingtian was clear that these people ought to be people who had come to participate in the 7-Star Sword Sect's Outer Court Disciple Test. The closer they got to the main peak, the more people they could see. The young men and women that had gathered from all over had seniors following by their sides, and in the end, they gathered beneath the 7-Star Sword Sect's main peak, the Dubi Peak, the only entrance into the 7-Star Sword Sect. The 7-Star Sword Sect's entrance had a height of 10 over meters, and on it were 4 large words carved exquisitely. 7-Star Sword Sect. This With just a glance, Duan Lingtian was attracted by these 4 large words. Even though he didn't study calligraphy, he was able to discern that these 4 large words were carved by a sword-cultivating expert with a single swing of his sword. They were like words of nature that didn't have any flaws. This entrance seems to have some history, Li Fei lightly said, with a tone that had traces of shock mixed within. She'd obviously been shocked by these 4 large words. Allegedly, this entrance existed when the 7-Star Sword Sect was established. These 4 words, 7-Star Sword Sect, were carved by the founder of the 7-Star Sword Sect. As Shang Quan spoke up to this point, he had a face full of reverence. Rumors say that when the 7-Star Sword Sect's founder established the 7-Star Sword Sect, he was already a void interpretation expert. Void interpretation expert, in other words, an expert that had stepped into the void interpretation stage. Void interpretation expert, Li Fei couldn't help herself from exclaiming in surprise. There are void interpretation experts in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Shang Quan shook his head. That's a matter of a few thousand years ago. According to my knowledge, it's already been very long since a void interpretation expert has appeared in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Even if it's void initiation experts, there probably aren't more than 50 of those in the entire Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. As he spoke up to hear, Shang Quan slightly sighed. That time, if Outboundless Sect had a void initiation expert, it most likely would not have been annihilated by the Black Fiend Sect. Duan Lingtian also knew some of the matters of the Boundless Sect from Shang Quan. The Boundless Sect could be considered a second-rate sect within the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Among the sects in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, sects that could be called top sects ordinarily had 5 or more void initiation stage experts within the sect, and there was no lack of existences at the 4th level of the void initiation stage or above. Below the top sects were first-rate sects. There were ordinarily 1 or 2 void initiation experts within these sects, and the strongest would ordinarily be at the 3rd level of the void initiation stage. Below that were the second-rate sects. They didn't have void initiation experts, and the difference between them and third-rate sects were the quantity and quality of void prying experts. Below the third-rate sects were some unrated sects. These unrated sects ordinarily only had 1 or 2 void prying martial artists, and in terms of strength, there was not much difference between them and the various imperial families of the kingdoms under the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. The Black Fiend sect that annihilated the Boundless sect was precisely a first-rate sect. Duan Lingtian looked at Shang Quan and asked, "The voice transmission jade slip that your Boundless sect's young sect leader left behind asked me to pass it to the Solitary Summit's solitary old man, Shang Guanyan. Could it be that Shang Guanyan isn't a void initiation expert?" Shang Quan slowly said, "Young master, the old man you speak of is the ancestor of our Boundless sect. He was in existence at the 9th level of the void prying stage over 10 years ago. Later on, he discarded his vexations on worldly affairs and decided to stay alone. As for whether he's broken through to the void initiation stage, it's something I have no way of knowing." As he finished speaking, Shang Quan had a sighing expression. He didn't carry any hopes. In terms of difficulty, a 9th level void prying martial artist wanting to break through to the void initiation stage was far more difficult than a half-step void stage martial artist breaking through to the void prying stage. Duan Lingtian nodded. Then he asked, "How far is the Solitary Summit?" Shang Quan lightly pondered. "If you were to travel by Fergana horse, it ought to take 5 months to arrive near the Solitary Summit." "That far?" Duan Lingtian frowned. He originally thought that if the Solitary Summit wasn't far away, he would ask Shang Quan to pass the void transmission jade slip to Shang Guanyan, and this could be considered as completing the desire of the Boundless sect's young sect leader. Now it would seem that there would temporarily be no need for this. If Shang Quan left, the round trip would take 10 months. It was too long. When I have the chance in the future, I'll go to the Solitary Summit to look for Shang Guanyan. Duan Lingtian made a decision in his heart. He didn't want Shang Quan to leave for so long, as if there was any urgent matter that he needed Shang Quan for, wouldn't he be delayed? Moreover, based on Duan Lingtian's estimations, even if Shang Guanyan knew of this matter, he might not be able to do anything to the Black Fiend sect. According to what Shang Quan said, there were 2 existences at the void initiation stage within the Black Fiend sect. One of them was even an expert at the 2nd level of the void initiation stage. Duan Lingtian returned to his senses and then looked around at his surroundings. He noticed that the people that gathered increased as time went by, and these people were all a group of young men and women, with the eldest seeming to be not older than 25. This was the criteria of the 7-star sword sect when recruiting disciples. Below 25, practically every young man and woman had a senior following by their side. Some of the seniors that followed by the side of these young men and women were even existences at the void-prying stage. At noon, the blazing sun hung high in the sky. 3 people finally walked out from behind the 7-star sword sect's entrance. Among the 3 people, the old man in the front was in the lead. This old man had an emaciated figure and a firm expression, and between his brows were traces of vigor and vitality mixed within. The old man's essence, energy, and spirit were all at the peak, and in some aspects, he wasn't inferior to a young person in the slightest. A 7-star sword sect elder. Duan Lingtian's gaze descended on the symbol at the old man's chest. The 7 stars surrounding the sword-shaped symbol were all gold. It was precisely the symbol of a 7-star sword sect elder. 2 young men followed behind the old man. Their ages were around 30, and they were 7-star sword sect inner court disciples. All those who were below 25 and participating in the test, stand over here. The old man had a calm expression as he spoke indifferently. Although his voice wasn't loud, it contained an incomparably large and heavy origin energy that echoed out into the ears of everyone present. Shang Quan, you can return. I'll look for you in Black Bamboo City if I need anything. Duan Lingtian nodded to Shang Quan and instructed him before taking the 2 little girls and slowly walking over. For a moment, a crowd of young men and women gathered together. Many young men noticed Li Fei and Ke. They were slightly stunned by the peerless appearances of the 2 and only recovered from their shock after a short moment. Then they looked at Duan Lingtian, who stood in between Ke and Li Fei, with faces full of envy and jealousy. So many people. Ke sized up the surroundings for a moment and was slightly surprised. Duan Lingtian nodded. The young men and women who were currently gathered together numbered at least 1,000. Meanwhile, the old man spoke again. Now, those that are 20 and below and haven't stepped into the 9th level of the core formation stage, leave. Instantly, a portion of the crowd left in dejection. Those that are 20 to 22, and haven't stepped into the 1st level of the origin core stage, leave. The old man continued. This time, even more people left. Those who are 22 and below and haven't stepped into the 1st level of the origin core stage must leave. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be astounded. In the entire Crimson Sky Kingdom that he previously resided in, one could count with one hand the amount of people that were able to step into the 1st level of the origin core stage when at 22 or below. The 7-star sword sect, as expected of the top sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. The test hadn't even started, it was only the 1st round of screening and it was already so strict. Those that are 22 to 23, and haven't stepped into the 2nd level of the origin core stage, leave. The old man's voice continued to sound out. This time, the faces of many young men and women went ghastly pale. Although they were slightly unwilling, they still obediently left. Those that are 23 to 25, and haven't stepped into the 3rd level of the origin core stage, leave. The old man's voice sounded out once more, and practically everyone was numb to it. 258 Chapter 259, Outer Court Disciple Test. Now, after the 1st round of screening, there were nearly 200 young men and women that still remained. Duan Lingtian couldn't help but be astounded. The quality of the genius martial artists of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdoms wasn't something that the Crimson Sky Kingdom could compare to after all. There were still so many that remained even under such harsh requirements. The remaining people, follow me. Then old man ordered, then he led the way with the 2 7-star sword sect inner court disciples. The crowd, including Duan Lingtian's group, followed behind in a formidable array to ascend the Dubi Peak. Dubi Peak, the main peak of the 7-star sword sect. On the way, the old man had a stentorian voice as he slowly said, I'm the elder in charge of this time's outer court disciple test. You all can call me Test Elder. Ascending the Dubi Peak now represents being one step closer to becoming 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. However, whether or not you're able to become an outer court disciple will all depend on your own ability. The old man continued, if you become an outer court disciple, don't slack off. The 7-star sword sect has a rule that if an outer court disciple is unable to pass the inner court test and become an inner court disciple by the age of 30, they will be expelled from 7-star sword sect. The old man's words caused many people to be shocked. An outer court disciple who's unable to become an inner court disciple by the age of 30 will be expelled from the 7-star sword sect. I heard that if one wanted to become a 7-star sword sect inner court disciple, one would at least need a cultivation at the 7th level of the origin core stage. I also heard that even if you have a cultivation at the 7th level of the origin core stage, you might not be able to pass the inner court test. Only with a cultivation at the 8th level of the origin core stage when participating in the inner court test would you be able to firmly pass the test. Many young men and women whispered amongst themselves. Even though their natural talents were good, wanting to break through to the 7th level of the origin core stage, or even the 8th level of the origin core stage, by the age of 30 wasn't an easy thing to accomplish. For a moment, many people felt pressured. Duan Lingtian followed within the crowd and only smiled indifferently when he heard the whispers of discussion from the crowd. Scoundrel, breaking through the 8th level of the origin core stage by the age of 30. So I have a chance. Li Fei looked at Duan Lingtian and was slightly perturbed. Duan Lingtian put his mouth close to Li Fei's ears, lightly blew at it, and said, with a voice that had a sense of agitation mixed within, "So long as you're obedient, I guarantee to make you break through to the 8th level of the origin core stage by the age of 25. How about it? Big scoundrel." Li Fei rolled her eyes at Duan Lingtian, and her beautiful face went slightly red all the way to her neck. Many young men looked at Duan Lingtian with gazes of envy that seemed as if they could pierce directly through him when they saw him and Li Fei being so intimate. However, Duan Lingtian ignored all these gazes. The nearly 200 people followed behind the old man and arrived halfway up Dubi Peak. Here was a vast stone platform, and near the stone platform stood many people. Duan Lingtian's gaze was sharp, so with a glance, he noticed that there were 6 batches of people standing there. 5 of the 6 batches were all led by an aged old man, and behind the old man were another 3 or 4 young men following. These old men were all 7-star sword sect elders. As for the young men following behind them, they were all 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. The other batch of people were all women. Although the 7-star sword sect women's attire was also green clothes, there were differences from the men's attire. It had lesser sturdiness and more delicateness, causing one to feel comfortable when laying eyes upon it, and it wasn't ugly. The person in the lead of the batch of women was a dignified, beautiful woman with a beautiful appearance. She was also a 7-star sword sect elder. Behind the beautiful woman followed 3 young women, and they were all 7-star sword sect outer court disciples as well. Duan Lingtian and the others followed behind Test Elder and stepped onto the stone platform. Meanwhile, that beautiful woman had already brought along the 3 young women as she walked over with large strides towards Duan Lingtian and the others. As for the 5 old men, they instead waited on the spot with the people behind them. What's this about? Duan Lingtian wondered in his heart. However, he quickly found out the answer. Test Elder's gaze swept past Duan Lingtian and the others, then he slowly said, "The women amongst you are exempted from the outer court disciple test and will directly become 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. Now, all of you follow the Alcade Peak's elder by to head to the Alcade Peak and become disciples of Alcade Peak." What Test Elder said caused all the young men and women that followed him to ascend the Dubi Peak to be stunned. All the young women's faces revealed pleasant surprise. Exempted from the test. Directly become 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. All the young men were dumbstruck. Even this is possible. Absurd thoughts arose within the hearts of some of the men. They wished for nothing more than to be women. The beautiful woman that came over, the Alcade Peak's elder Bai, said, with a calm voice that didn't contain any feelings, "Female disciples, follow me." "Go on." Duan Lingtian smiled as he said this to the 2 little girls by his side. Seeing the 2 girls seeming to be hesitant, Duan Lingtian said, "I'll go look for you 2 once I become an outer court disciple." The 2 girls only obediently nodded after they heard what he said, then they walked out with the group of young women. Li Fei and Kei seemed to stand out amongst the group of young women. Earlier, during the journey here, due to there being many people didn't see their true appearances, but now, along with the 30+ women walking out, they instantly attracted the gazes of everyone present. So beautiful. Many men's eyes lit up, as they were subdued by Li Fei and Kei's peerless appearances. Even the beautiful woman, Elder Bai, her eyes couldn't help but shine when she saw Li Fei and Kei, and her eyes had a sense of surprise mixed within. It wasn't that she hadn't seen women with such extraordinary appearance. However, the most hard to come by point would be having an extraordinary appearance and shocking natural talent. So many beautiful women had ordinary natural talent and at most would only end up being reduced to trophy wives. In next to no time, the beautiful woman notified Test Elder, then she brought along the group of young women to directly leave, obviously returning to Alcade Peak. I heard long ago that there are only women in the 7-star sword sect's Alcade Peak. I never expected it to be true, a young man that stood nearby to Duan Lingtian exclaimed in surprise. Of course, allegedly, the female outer court disciples of 7-star sword sect are ordinarily cultivating on Alcade Peak. You can see some female disciples on Dubi Peak, but those female disciples are all inner court disciples, and their ages aren't young anymore. As a young man finished saying this, his face had a strange expression. I really am jealous of them for being able to be exempted from the test and directly become outer court disciples. Many people had jealous expressions. Actually, it can be understood, as they're women after all, and women that are able to satisfy test elders' earlier screening conditions could already be considered to be hard to come by. Directly becoming outer court disciples is reasonable, another person said. What the latter said also obtained the agreement of most of the people present. Women were born weaker than men. Duan Lingtian's gaze was on K'er and Li Fei the whole time until they followed the Alcade Peak's elder Bai to ascend higher up Dubi Peak and disappear before his eyes. Only then did he withdraw his gaze. Meanwhile, the remaining 150-plus young men, including Duan Lingtian, accompanied Test Elder to arrive at the center of the platform. Test Elder abruptly turned around and then looked at Duan Lingtian and the others. The group of people stopped their footsteps upon seeing this. Only 100 people amongst all of you will remain in the end. In other words, 53 people will be eliminated. Test Elder's burning gaze flashed past the group of young men, causing many young men who were already slightly perturbed to go pale. Now there were precisely 153 people amongst them. In other words, more than 1/3 would be eliminated. I wonder what test it will be, Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. He was slightly curious and slightly in anticipation. Duan Lingtian still had 100% confidence towards passing the test, so he wasn't worried. Duan Lingtian's face went grim. Suddenly, he noticed that a formidable aura instantly enveloped down towards them from Test Elder, pressing down on the group of young men, including Duan Lingtian. This formidable aura belonged to a void-prying stage expert. Moreover, it wasn't an ordinary void-prying stage expert's aura. This Test Elder is actually in existence at the 7th level of the void-prying stage. Duan Lingtian was shocked in his heart. As for Test Elder's aura, it couldn't pose much of an affect to him. After all, his spiritual force was comparable to a nascent soul martial artist. And not to mention this, just the tenacity of his will wasn't something that an ordinary person could compare to. He was someone who had experienced 2 lifetimes. Duan Lingtian quickly noticed that due to being caught off guard, over 10 young men had instantly collapsed on the ground. These young men that collapsed on the ground found it difficult to stand up again and lay there with shivering bodies. To them, the imposing manner of a 7th-level void-prying stage expert was too strong. Before long, Duan Lingtian noticed that many people had collapsed. Swoosh, 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 in the sky, ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form one by one. It was the remaining young men reacting to the situation and circulating their cultivation to defend against Test Elder's imposing manner. For a time, the sky was filled with dense ancient mammoth silhouettes, and it was utterly impossible to see clearly which ancient mammoth silhouettes belonged to who. Bang! In next to no time, another young man collapsed and was frothing in his mouth. Time slowly passed by. Only 127 young men currently still remained standing. Now, practically all the people present had realized that this sudden imposing manner of a void-prying stage expert was precisely the outer court disciple test that they had to face. The 10+ people that collapsed first all lied there on the ground with faces full of bitterness and helplessness. They knew that they were bound to have no fate with the 7-star sword sect. Among the 127 people that remained standing, only a portion of the people were stable like Mount Tai. The figures of most people were trembling and would collapse at any moment. They gritted their teeth and persisted. Because they knew that so long as another 27 people collapsed, and so long as they didn't collapse, they would pass the test. So boring. Duan Lingtian stood in the crowd and yawned as he lazily stretched his body. 259 Chapter 260, Megrez Peak. A young man just happened to be standing behind Duan Lingtian. The young man originally gritted his teeth and tried his best to forcefully hold on. However, when he saw the leisurely and carefree Duan Lingtian before him lazily stretching, he couldn't hold on any longer, and he lost his focus, then his body trembled before crashing onto the ground. The sound from behind startled Duan Lingtian, and he turned around to take a look. The young man that had collapsed on the ground had a face covered in bitterness, and when he noticed Duan Lingtian turning around, his eyes nearly went black and passed out. Oh my God, what did he see? The young man that stood before him was actually a young man that wasn't even 20. He suddenly felt that he'd wasted his life for all these years. Duan Lingtian noticed the young man that had collapsed on the ground staring at him and couldn't help but ask in wonder, "Friend, are you all right?" The young man opened his mouth when he heard Duan Lingtian, but in the end, he didn't say anything. The imposing manner of Test Elder enveloped them, causing it to be difficult for him to speak. In his heart, only one thought remained. Abnormal. This violet-clothed young man is simply abnormal. Bang, 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 comma. After half an hour, one by one the young men collapsed onto the ground, and only 100 young men still remained standing. Meanwhile, the imposing manner of Test Elder was withdrawn. Duan Lingtian looked around at his surroundings. He noticed that amongst the young men that were standing, some of them had similar ages to him, and the cultivation of these people hadn't yet broken through to the origin core stage. They obviously could hold on because of their shocking will. A test like this is really interesting, it's direct enough and straightforward enough. Duan Lingtian secretly thought in his heart. Along with the withdrawal of Test Elder's imposing manner, everyone instantly felt the pressure on their bodies lessen, and brilliant smiles hung upon the faces of the people who still remained standing. Whereas the 53 people who were collapsed on the ground all had bitter smiles and helpless expressions. "You two, take them down the peak." Test Elder instructed the two 7-star sword sect inner court disciples behind him. Yes, the two 7-star sword sect inner court disciples brought the 53 people who had just stood up with difficulty to leave. These 53 people could be considered to have come here for nothing. Congratulations to all of you for becoming outer court disciples of our 7-star sword sect. Test Elder's gaze flashed past all 100 young men, including Duan Lingtian, and he slowly said, "Now, I'll roughly introduce our 7-star sword sect to you. Our 7-star sword sect is divided into 7 great sword peaks, and the Dubi peak is the main peak amongst them. The cultivation locations in the main peak belongs to the 7-star sword sect higher-ups and the inner court disciples. Outer court disciples cultivate on the other 6 peaks. Among the outer court 6 peaks, the Alcade peak is the cultivation location for the outer court female disciples. The other 5 peaks are the cultivation locations for the outer court male disciples." Speaking up to this point, Test Elder continued. "Now, the elders of the other 5 peaks and the inner court disciples they brought along will each choose 20 people from amongst you. In the future, all of you will be the outer court disciples of the peak that the elder who choose you is from. As for other details and introductions, the elders of each peak will give all of you a detailed account. Alcade Peak, the cultivation location for the female outer court disciples." Duan Lingtian shook his head with a smile. That was no different than a kingdom of women. Meanwhile, under the instructions of Test Elder, the other elders of the other 5 peaks brought along the disciples behind them and walked over in large strides. When these people came close, Duan Lingtian noticed a familiar figure. Duan Lingtian never expected that he would encounter this person here. Among the 3 outer court disciples behind an old man that had a goatee, one of them could be considered to be an old acquaintance of Duan Lingtian. It was precisely one of the 3 7-star sword sect disciples he'd encountered in the restaurant 5 days ago. One of the 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. Because of the far distance between them earlier, Duan Lingtian didn't notice this person. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian noticed that this 7-star sword sect outer court disciple had noticed him as well, and not only that, this 7-star sword sect outer court disciple didn't seem surprised when he noticed Duan Lingtian, as if he'd known of Duan Lingtian's existence since long ago. Perhaps when Kair and Li Fei left with the Alcade Peak's elder by, he'd already guesses that I was here, Duan Lingtian thought secretly in his heart. Meanwhile, the elders of the other 5 peaks had already arrived before them with the outer court disciples behind them. Duan Lingtian noticed that the outer court disciple he had enmity with directly charged towards him. The outer court disciple had a smile of victory on the corners of his mouth as he threw a small command token to Duan Lingtian. "In the future, you're an outer court disciple of our Megrez Peak." Duan Lingtian's brows knitted as he caught the command token, and when he looked carefully, he noticed that this was the command token of the 7-star sword sect's Megrez Peak's disciple. A smile of mischief appeared on the face of this 7-star sword sect outer court disciple, then he looked at Duan Lingtian and inclined his body forward to come close to Duan Lingtian, and he said, in a low voice, "Kid, I never expected to encounter you here. Enemies really are bound to meet. I'm truly curious, without that nascent soul martial artist to rely on here, will you kneel before me and plead for mercy?" Kneel and plead for mercy? Duan Lingtian couldn't refrain from bursting out into a laugh when he heard what this outer court disciple said. In the blink of an eye, Duan Lingtian withdrew the smile from his face and put an expressionless face as he crossed eyes with the outer court disciple, then he slowly said a word. "Idiot. You." This 7-star sword sect outer court disciple never imagined that Duan Lingtian would still dare to be perverse before him now. His face instantly sank and he gnashed his teeth. "Kid, you'll regret it." Duan Lingtian Yan then paid no further attention to this outer court disciple. He walked over to the old man with the goatee, the elder of Megrez Peak. Meanwhile, the Megrez Peak had chosen the allocated 20 people. "I'm Lu Chu, the outer court elder of Megrez Peak. In the future, all of you can address me as Elder Lu," the old man with a goatee said, to the 20 new outer court disciples. Elder Lu. Instantly, many people took the lead to greet him, as they were thinking of getting familiar with Elder Lu. "All of you have just entered the sect and don't know of many things. I'll take all of you back to Megrez Peak now. I and these 3 senior brothers of yours will explain the things you need to pay attention to in the 7-star sword sect on the way." As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Chu brought Duan Lingtian and the others to continue ascending Dubi Peak. On the way, Lu Chu's voice sounded out. "Since all of you have entered the 7-star sword sect, you must abide by the rules of 7-star sword sect. Disciples of the 7-star sword sect must not use their strength to bully the weak. This is the thousands of years old decree of the sect since its establishment. Besides that, unless on the life and death arena, sect disciples within 7-star sword sect must not kill each other. Violators will be severely punished without mercy according to the rules of the sect." As he finished speaking, his tone had a sense of coldness within, causing chills to run down one's spine. "Elder Lu, what's the life and death arena?" Instantly, one of the outer court disciples that had just entered 7-star sword sect couldn't refrain from asking. Lu Chu looked at one of the outer court disciples beside him. "Huo Xin, explain it." Yes, the person that Lu Chu called upon wasn't anyone else, it was precisely that 7-star sword sect outer court disciple that was enemies with Duan Lingtian. However, before Lu Chu, Huo Xin was reverent and respectful and didn't dare be inattentive in the slightest. Huo Xin's gaze descended onto the group of 7-star sword sect outer court disciples that had just entered the sect, and when his gaze flashed past Duan Lingtian, it seemed to have a strand of a cold light mixed within. Of course, when this cold light flashed by, only Duan Lingtian, the target of the coldness, was able to notice it. Huo Xin. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a sneer. He was disdainful towards the cold light that flashed within Huo Xin's eyes. As far as he was concerned, this Huo Xin was nothing more than a clown. The life and death arena is an extremely special existence in our 7-star sword sect. Every one of the 7 great sword peaks of 7-star sword sect has their own life and death arena. This life and death arena is the place where disciples vent irreconcilable enmities. Once one enters the life and death arena, it is equivalent to putting one's own life as a wager. Entering the life and death arena also means that the enmity won't end until one of the parties die. The life and death arena is the one and only place within our 7-star sword sect where one doesn't have to take any responsibility for killing someone. Huo Xin slowly spoke. As he finished, his gaze once again descended onto Duan Lingtian's figure, and there was no lack of provocation within it. As if he was asking Duan Lingtian, "Do you dare enter the life and death arena with me?" In next to no time, Huo Xin noticed that Duan Lingtian hadn't looked him in the eye from the beginning until the end, and this caused his face to go even gloomier. When was he ever ignored by someone like this? More importantly, the person that ignored him was an outer court disciple that had only just entered 7-star sword sect. "Kid, I'll make you die sooner or later." Dense killing intent arose within Huo Xin's heart. The current him wasn't purely wanting to get back at Duan Lingtian for the loss of face in the restaurant 5 days ago. In his heart, he'd already completely hated this violet-clothed young man. Along with Huo Xin finishing his speech, besides Duan Lingtian, who was still composed, all the outer court disciples who had just entered the 7-star sword sect more or less experienced changes in their expressions, and some of them were terrified to the point that their faces went ghastly pale. Life and death arena, no end until one party dies. No need to take responsibility for killing someone. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled into a smile. This life and death arena was really a great place. Of course, Duan Lingtian was also clear in his heart that the existence of the life and death arena was only capable of restricting 7-star sword sect disciples from killing each other up to a certain extent. Secretly, so long as it's not noticed by another, one can still kill and not need to take any responsibility. The existence of the life and death arena was only to cause the 7-star sword sect disciples to not dare kill another under the circumstances that someone else is present. If no one was present, there would be no difference whether there was a life and death arena or not. Before long, Lu Chu spoke again. After all of you become members of Megrez Peak, I hope all of you can bring honor to Megrez Peak. So long as someone brings honor to Megrez Peak, the Megrez Peak will absolutely not treat you shabbily. What Lu Chu said caused all the 20 outer court disciples who had just entered 7-star sword sect to be stunned. Elder Lu, what do you mean by this? One of the new outer court disciples had a bewildered expression and couldn't stop himself from asking.